Good evening and welcome to the Board of Selectmen's February 27th meeting. We have a very full agenda this evening, and so I'm going to try and keep things moving as best as I can. I would like to get home and have dinner at some point this evening. So before we commence, our first item of business are citizens' comments. So are there any citizens' comments this evening? Okay, there being none, I think we're going to move forward to the first item on the agenda. And the first item on the agenda is a notice of intent to lay out Stagecoach Lane. And Mr. Dwelly, are you going to present that?
Sure. I believe Mr. Howes is in attendance, though I haven't...
No,
is
he's
he
not.
here? Okay.
Should we move to the next item, or?
Um,
And wait to see if he comes up? Why don't we do
could
that?
do that.
Okay. All right, so we will move to item 1.2 on the agenda. And item 1.2 is from the Historical Commission. And this evening, you are going to discuss the relocation of a structure that is significantly historical to the town.
The Historical Commission is bringing three items.
Right, well,
So
this is
Steve,
the
can you
first
come up?
item. And Steve, if,
And Richard Eels is going to put
Okay.
out the first item that...
so the first item on our agenda is the Historical Commission's request to relocate a historical building. And we have you presenting that, is that incorrect? So if you could come up here and make that presentation, I'd appreciate it. The next item of business is you, Mr. Eels.
Well, the Historical Commission brought before you perhaps 2 years ago the question of whether the town would provide a suitable site to potentially move a highly historically significant structure, historically significant to the town, to that site as a permanent site. There's been some discussion about that, and things have moved along some such that a structure that is historically significant to the town may be in play and may require the necessity that it be moved instead of it being demolished. That has not gone through any official channel yet, but there is that news in the wind, so we're reacting prospectively regarding that and asking that the town consider a piece of property that it owns as a suitable place to put this structure, which would not be moved so far away from its current site if the town were to use Chickering Fields, a small portion of it. And we're not asking you to legislate that. We're interested in your just accepting the concept of the town actually providing a site for such a structure that would function subsequently as either purely something of historical interest or could actually provide some town offices or some function that the town would avail itself of regarding that structure. The funds for moving that structure are in place.
Okay.
So the funds for maintaining that structure may also as well be in place.
Can you describe the structure, the size in particular?
The size, I might need some help on that from fellow members of the committee. in terms of-
50 by 80.
Okay. 50 feet by 80 feet is an estimate.
Okay.
That may be
So that's larger than
generous.
the Carroll
That may be
House?
generous.
I think that is generous.
Yeah. So,
I think it could be moved in its entirety at once. It's like the size of a small house or something.
So I have a couple of questions too.
Yep, go ahead.
So, so I took a ride and looked around today. And I was looking at Chickering, and I have a couple of questions, general questions as well. So my understanding is Chickering Fields is controlled by the school committee, not by us. So,
The local school committee.
yeah, the local school
But
committee.
they're not autonomous, are they?
They are.
They are. And the only reason why I happen to know that is because when I was on school committee, the Park and Recreation Department wanted to do some work on the fields, and they had to come to us on the school committee. So we may not be the right party for the Chickering Field site. And then I guess the second thing was when I was parked outside Chickering Field, I obviously went across from where the Carroll, is it the Carroll House?
Yes,
And
yeah,
the Fisher
yeah.
Barn are currently located. And it seemed to me that if you have the Carroll House and you have the Fisher Barn, that this particular building, which I think was a school, I think, would seem to be fit in that quadrant of Dover.
The Historical Society was unofficially approached regarding this close to 2 years ago.
Okay.
And I believe they deliberated about it nonetheless. And they didn't think that would be productive. They think that the current footprint that they have, which includes the Carroll House and the Fisher Barn, can't handle anything of that capacity. They would be interested if we were to locate a Hodgson hen house to move there, but not a structure of that
Okay.
size.
So then the other proposal that I thought I read was around the post office.
We looked at that as a group and thought that it wasn't amenable for that particular structure that we're alluding to.
Right, so just for me, and you're looking at the post office, is it to the property to the left of the post office?
If you face the post office to the left, it's wet.
Yeah, okay.
To the behind, to the rear, there's a dry area, but the parking capacity right now in the post office is strained. I don't know if you've noticed that there are cars in the post office that number more than the people that are in the post office at times lately. I don't understand why, but
As
I've
parties
noticed
go
that.
on, I understand. So then we come back to the Chickering site, and then...
And there may be other sites the town has, but actually reviewed the other sites we know that the town supposedly owns or has control of, and nothing else was as amenable as the Chickering site.
Okay. Now, going back to your current site where Carroll House is and the Fisher Barn.
That's the Dover Historical Society we're talking about, not the commission.
Okay. So if I look at that when I looked at that property, it was property to the right of that series of installation. Is that Park and Rec property? Is that private property? Does anyone actually know?
Carroll Park.
Carroll Park does
So
come,
you've
yeah.
got the two buildings, you have Carroll House and the Fisher Barn, then you've got a bunch of woods,
Yep.
and then you have the fields and the
And
park.
then you have the
in
field,
front,
right.
on that.
So specifically the woods.
Well, so it's all part of Park and Rec.
Okay.
Which, again, I assume is autonomous.
They're an independent board. So I think, I'm not exactly sure what you're
Thank you.
looking for us to do this evening, but it's very difficult to make a decision based upon not knowing what the potential site is going to be and what the structure is going to look like on the site and what the impact could potentially be to the town.
I understand that.
So, the concept sounds like something we could entertain, but at this juncture, I just feel as though it's premature to make any kind of a decision. We would also need to understand what the house could potentially be used for. We would need to understand what the maintenance costs would be in the future. so to make a decision this evening is very difficult.
We're just seeking from you a sense that the town would accept the possibility of enabling that concept.
So, my position is, and if I will ask my two fellow selectmen, we would certainly entertain this, but we really need a lot more information. And some of the questions I posed, that's the type of information we would need to get to fully understand and fully vet what it would mean for the town to provide a parcel of land.
It doesn't really answer our question, which was posed 2 years ago, and we're getting the same answer. We need to know that it's possible that the town would accept the notion that a historically significant structure could be moved to town property.
So again,
And again, obviously, there's all sorts of things in the pudding.
right,
But
but we need to make that decision. There's some information that's needed. So if you could come back and give us the information we're asking for. For instance, what do you believe this, what would be the future use of it? Would it be a museum? Is it something that the town could use? What are going to be the costs on an ongoing basis? So we could look at those. It's very hard to make any type of decision based upon the information we have this
So-
evening.
From the standpoint of here's what we'd have to explain. You're asking us to make a decision. Here's what we'd have to tell people that we don't know. What's the current use of the building?
What it's
What's
gonna
the-
look like on a
What's the
parcel.
current feasibility of the
Right.
building being moved? What's the building, what's the current state? What's the current, start with the structure. What's it being used for right now? Has it been donated? What's the current structural integrity of the building? These are all questions that people are going to ask, or certainly we're going to ask in some type of a due diligence process. Start with the building. What can we do? What should we do? Right? We have buildings of historical significance that we're constantly looking at, and we've been looking at for a long time. We've got Carroll, we've got the building in Whiting Avenue, right? On Whiting Road. So we're certainly not opposed to the concept, right? We can take an historical building and we can put an historical building on town-owned land. We have that. We have current buildings that fall into that category. I don't think that's an unreasonable request at all, and I think that's something that we would do if it was certainly of historical significance and a major impact to the town. I think we could accommodate that. But before we do that, before we make that type of a decision, we'd need a lot of information as to what your cost would be to do it, where you'd get the money from and where we would get the money from, and what our liability would be going forward. I think all questions that we certainly could answer, and I think that we would be open to.
a lot of members of the commission have anything to add?
All right, thank you.
May I we went through the same process 10 years ago or so when we were discussing 6 Farm Street, right? The oldest building in Dover. And we looked at various properties. We had issues about utilities, Board of Health issues with septic and water, in addition to all the siting issues and everything else. So you might want to talk to some of the folks that were very involved with where they were going to place 6 Farm, even though they were prepared to take it apart and store it in the barn, to understand what they were going through and why it was very problematic to find a site that would work with all the Board of Health issues and the use issues and everything else.
Richard, you want to tackle that?
No.
Okay.
I'll be moved.
Well, so, again, just to reiterate, we're not opposed to exploring this idea, but there's a lot more information that we need. So if you could get that information for us and bring it back to us, we can continue this conversation. Thank you.
I'm not good, Mark.
I am, but my seat's been taken, so. I'm just extending.
Right, so then, Mr. Howe, we skipped over your item, so that's okay. We're going to do the next two historical commission, and then we'll come back to you. All right, thank you. So then the next item on our agenda is the Historical Commission's request to honor Paul Tedesco. And who's going to speak to that?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I have one more. Yep.
We had hoped that we would be able to honor Paul before he passed away. But just given timing and doing things, we're going to do this now with Eleanor involved and hopefully other members of his family. Steve did talk to Craig, and there's a bench right outside the Department of Public Works building. That's the bench that's pictured there. Now, we've imposed an inscription on that, and I know it's a little hard to read, so I'll hold this up because I think this won't be an eye chart for you guys. But we did make sure that Eleanor wanted the H, Paul H. Tedesco, and this is meaningful because the bench is actually on the site of the E.F. Hodgson factory. And Paul, of course, was notable for not only the historical things that he did with the town of Dover, but also a number of other towns and in education as well. So, we have contacted Natick Memorial over on Pond Street in Natick, and they've advised us on the best way to both do this. We had thought about a plaque, but a plaque has a number of challenges of hogging out the metal and recessing it, and plaques are not quite as long-lasting as the Rock of Ages, if you will. So we felt that the cost aspects were very similar of a plaque, installing it, and of just engraving the bench on the top. The Historical Commission has a budget, and this would fit within that. It would be about $1,500. We have made a couple of changes from the first quote, but we think that $1,500 adequately represents the cost of honoring Paul and the work that he's done in the town.
So I think, I served with Paul on the Historic Commission for a time, and he's really a huge asset to Dover and many other communities. And I think this is very tasteful. I would move to approve it.
Second.
You answered one of my very fundamental questions, which was why the location.
Ah, yes, yes.
So
It's the perfect
It
location.
really is, and I just said, I scratched in my head, how does this actually make sense? Because I also had met Paul and dealt with him in the past as well. So thank you for that. And I don't know if you actually introduced yourself.
Yeah, I'm Gene Hornsby, 11 Hales Hollow. Not a long-term resident in terms of being a native, but bordering on 40 years in Dover. So
A newcomer.
I do care a lot about the town.
Thank you.
So,
If you guys are all set? Any other?
You gonna do the motion?
right, so I'll make a motion, and I would also like to thank Paul for all his service to the town. It did not go unnoticed. He was really, as I mentioned, a huge asset, and I really enjoyed talking with him, and I'm glad I had the opportunity to serve with him.
We should say that there will also, in addition to the bench itself, there will be a small ceremony that we're planning to conduct.
Do you have a date?
And the date, in all likelihood, it's still, Eleanor is the one who crucial regarding that. The date is around the first Wednesday in May, potentially.
Nice.
And we will publicize the event tastefully, and hopefully some other Dover residents will be able to also honor Paul at that time.
Very nice.
Please let us know when you officially set the date. So I would like to make a motion to approve engraving the existing stone bench at the Highway Department and holding a ceremony to honor Paul Tedesco.
So moved.
All in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, guys.
This is very, very nice design. And now the next item of business is the Historic Commission's proposal to change the demolition law. And Mr. Ailes, you're gonna make it. Can
Thank
you
you.
introduce yourself?
I will.
Okay, thanks.
My name is Richard Eels, and I live at 109 Farm Street. And as you're going down Farm and you turn by Bridge Street, it's the first house on the right, yellow house with a picket fence in front of it, old house, 1844. Just by way of introduction, I'm recently in Dover, like 37 years, but my wife's family has been here for a long time. As a matter of fact, 100 years ago, her great-grandfather was sitting at that table. He was a selectman right after.
Doing a
World War II.
better,
Same table.
Make it the same.
doing
It
a
was
better job than
definitely the
us.
same chair, let me tell you.
Exactly.
It was positively.
I've been on the Historical Commission for a long time. As a matter of fact, I wrote the bylaw that got passed in '96 on the second attempt to have a demolition review bylaw in Dover, as other towns around us were also doing. And at that time, I made a big mistake, and I'm hoping you'll let me undo it. When I wrote the bylaw, I wrote it to apply to any structure built in 1929 or before. And we put in a solid date, 1929. Some of the towns around us had a date like that they were using, and anything before that would be applicable to the bylaw. And other towns had like a rolling limit, like any building more than 50 years old, okay? And I didn't choose that latter option, and now I regret it, because now we've moved on from 1996, and now it's 2020, 24 years later. And so that gap between a structure that can be evaluated and now has increased in that time. And so all we're asking to do is make one change, which is to set the time gap between now and when a building might be applicable to exactly the same number of years as it was when we originally passed the law.
Which was 50?
No, 67.
67.
I mean, we just made it exactly the same number. I mean, I know it's an odd number, but we made it exactly the same number.
So what's the significance of 67?
67 years.
67 years?
Now,
No.
but it's the same gap that it was before, so no one could say that we're trying to increase the gap.
Yeah, the question I asked, and not well, is why 67? What is the significance of 67 years? When you first
Because
wrote the
from when we
bylaw?
passed the bylaw in '96 to the houses that it became applicable to in '29, that was 67.
Okay,
So when we passed the bylaw, it was applicable to any house that was more than 67 years old. And we just wanted to have that be the current bylaw also.
so
Am I
now
making
that the
myself
gap,
clear?
so
Yeah.
now that the gap's increased, isn't it more favorable because you're looking at more?
Fewer. No, we're looking at the same number of houses, but now there are houses that are built after 1929 that we feel that we should be looked at. Most of the towns around us do have a figure like 50 or 75 years old before a house can be reviewed by the commission. As a matter of fact, if I read the bylaw correctly, in Wellesley, there's no limit at all. Every demolition permit goes before the commission. And I will say that we have been, I think, very responsible in our administration of the bylaw. In the 24 years since the bylaw passed, we've probably passed on between 50 and 70 houses at least, and we have put a hold on only 4. Okay? And those 4 were all special houses. One of them was Six Farm, Teddy Bagg's house. Another was a house on Claybrook, which when it went to be demolished, we discovered it had been moved here from New Hampshire. And it was a very historic house to the people in New Hampshire, in certain southern New Hampshire. And we contacted them and we said, we're about to tear down this house that was brought here in pieces. Do you want it? And they said, yes, we do. So they came and they tore it apart and explored it for a couple of years, raised money, and now it's been rebuilt in Salmon Falls, in New Hampshire, and it's a very historic house in New Hampshire. The other thing that we saved was obviously the Fisher Barn, got saved. And there's another small house on Center Street that was a 1700 house, and actually somebody took that house and moved it behind their house and made it a playhouse for their kids. They took the old historic part. So it's only been 4 times that we have imposed a 1-year delay on the houses. So most of the time, we've had to let go structures that we didn't want to have to let go. If there's no reasonable chance of saving it, if there's no chance of moving it somewhere, if there's no chance of getting another buyer that might save it and rehab it. Where's that?
Farm Street?
Yes, but not the one you're thinking of. Okay? Last summer, we got a call that they wanted to demolish this house. And this is not the house on Farm Street you think it is. It's on Farm Street already.
But it's set way back?
49 Farm Street. It's at the end of a 6/10 of a mile dirt driveway. And behind there was this gorgeous Georgian-style mansion. And this house was historic. This house was built by the mayor of Boston, Mayor Peters. You know the story?
Do not.
Anybody know where the teepee house is?
Yes.
Okay. Mayor Peters built 2 houses. One was the teepee house, which is down there, and the other was this house, way back up Farm Street you're up the top of Pekin Hill, and you get way back up in there. And he built this house for himself and his wife. And the teepee house he built for his girlfriend.
Mistress.
It was a teenager named Star Faithful. And she died in she disappeared on a transatlantic passage. Disappeared. And actually, Gloria Vanderbilt wrote a book, a novelization of her life. So if any house in Dover was connected to a famous person, that might have been it. Okay?
Or a famous story.
I thought I might entertain you. But we didn't, when we looked at this house, it was in such bad shape that, to rehab it was going to cost millions of dollars. And that's a situation where even though it's a very historic house and we would love to have it be still in Dover, we couldn't just say, no, you can't do that, because, we met with the architects and the builders and blah, blah, blah. So we have not been overly rambunctious in our interpretation of the law. If a house has no chance of being resurrected, if we can't think of any way to save it, we have no choice really but to let it go. And we've only done that, as I say, 4 times, and the times that we've done it have been 3 out of 4 successful. We did lose 6 Farm Street, unfortunately. So we're hoping to get your support to change the bylaw to the 67 years instead of 1929.
So you guys have an inventory of houses that...
An inventory was done when the original Dover Historical Commission was started in '78, I believe. An inventory was done. The problem with an inventory is if the bylaw is based on a list of houses, what do we do when we've missed them? And hardly any towns have a list that their bylaw references. It's always a date and an age. And particularly in Dover, like other towns, if you try to traipse through the town records, it's darn hard to find out when a house was built. because there were no building permits in the old days. Many times, if you look in the records in the town, across the hall, the first notice of a house will be when a building permit was issued for a repair or something in 1932, but the house was built in 1821. Okay. So there's no easy way to find out all the houses.
Okay, so you wouldn't be able to tell me how many houses would be impacted by this change?
No, but I could try to find out before the warrant committee hearing.
Okay, and
There were less than 100 that were applicable the first time, 1929, and we probably lost 20, 30, 40 of those.
Can I feel that? There are a few hundred houses in that time frame that we're talking about that a change in the bylaw
Would affect.
in terms of review. Of those few hundred houses, it's highly unlikely that more than 2 or 3 would be of interest enough to us to impose a 1-year demolition delay. But I would reference what has occurred in Dover in the last 5 months or so, in that an Elliott Noyes designed house that was built in 1940 was torn down entirely without a demolition permit.
Charles Jackson, 33 pounds.
And what happens in that case?
It was up to the building inspector to pursue that. It's already been adjudicated by the building inspector. That house, the good news about that house is the current owner is going to restore the Elliott Noyes house, design house, which was called the Jackson House, to its original condition with upgraded wiring and plumbing fixtures. It was a national treasure, and we'll be able to see something, and hopefully in the next year or 2, that is just a reflection of what it was.
so that gets to my second question. I said, if I was a property owner, how would I know that I was buying or I currently own something that is historically significant? I mean, it sounds like the answer is no, given that this house. So to me, it's a question of sort of notice, right? The bylaws is pretty broad. The language around it is it's not ambiguous, but it's pretty ambiguous, and it was hard for me to understand, what the criteria was going to be to use to assess these houses. And as you move from 1929 through the 30s and the 40s, etc., I was just looking for a way that I could, if I was asked the question, how do we know if we have a historical house and what does it mean? I couldn't find an answer. So I went back to what I normally do, which is, do you guys have a number of houses, and what's the criteria that you would use so that if people own a house that you would proactively suggest might be historically significant, they would be able to respond to that. And so there just seems to be, there's sort of, I'd like to have a better sense of what are we talking about? How many houses? How do people know if they own a historical house? And I also think that a year for a review period of time seems like an awful long time.
I'm sorry, the last thing you
A
said?
year review seems like an awful long time.
So my recollection is that we brought this to town meeting once before, and it got voted down. And my concern here is we have posed questions that we don't have answers to. And, we're trying really hard to try and make town meeting very efficient. And the way that gets done is for information to get out to citizens as best as we can get it out, and to make sure that we answer questions that need to get answered. And so Mr. Springett has raised a really good point. Town meeting is going to want to know, how many homes does this impact? What does it do to me if I am a homeowner of one of those houses? You did a really excellent job. I think the statistic that you gave us, that since 1996, since this bylaw has been in place, there've really only been 4 houses in which you've actually move forward, and not you personally, but where the bylaw has actually moved forward to and delayed a potential sale by a year to determine how best to sort out the situation. So I would strongly urge all of you as a group to huddle and get the answers to some of these questions and come to the open hearing and make another presentation so that so that you're answering questions that you're going to get at town meeting. And my concern is attendees at town meeting will get frustrated and just move the question, and you'll be back to where you are today. So I just strongly urge you to get these answers and make sure that the presentation you're going to make answers all the questions that people are going to pose, even if it means delaying the voting on this warrant article in this current town meeting. Because for me, even for me right now, it's very difficult to give you support without knowing the answers to those questions.
I have two things. One, you said that this was brought before town meeting and defeated, and I've been on the commission for a long time.
No, I said, correct me if I'm wrong. So if you haven't, it could be
No, we
a lapse of memory. Okay,
Yeah.
then, okay. So
we
then
did
I
propose a
correct.
bylaw change 2 years ago that was much more extensive than this.
Okay.
And we withdrew,
Okay,
but it never made it to town meeting.
okay.
And the other thing I would say, Mr. Stringer, is that the objections that you're raising are
They're-
objections to the bylaw.
No, they're
They're
not,
not
they're
objections.
not
They're just-
objections.
No, the
It's-
concerns you're raising are concerns about the bylaw, which is already law,
Yeah, that's
right?
okay.
And that has been addressed at town meeting
But by-
and passed.
Right, but what we're trying to encourage you as a group is we're not against this, but we're just three individuals here who have questions, and what we're trying to do is encourage you. And you know, open hearing is 2 weeks away. Listen to some of the questions we had and address those at the open hearing, because I think it will go a very long way in helping sell the change that you're trying to get passed. And I agree with you, it's not, the bylaw already does all the things, and all you're trying to do is make a really minor change. But my concern is there are going to be a lot of questions that are going to dig down into your point, into the bylaw in and of itself. So I'm hoping if you just get up there and say, you know, this is how many houses it will potentially
And
impact.
here's our history.
Here's our history. Again, people, we're not, the bylaw already exists. All we're trying to do is change the date.
So let me
And I was hoping that it was a small enough change that I could get your support,
But I will tell you
so that I
what,
could go into that warrant hearing and say that I have the support of the selectmen, rather than they have a lot of questions and it's going to be
Well,
shot down again.
I'll just tell you what I did, right? And I don't think I'm going to be unique here. When I got the agenda and went to the items and went to this item, the first thing I did was looked at the Historical Commission website, and I looked at your FAQs, because I had no idea what the bylaw said. I had no idea. And so I don't think that's an extreme reaction. And so I was surprised. But my first question was, what's the impact to the people who potentially own these houses? And I think that's a fair question.
Well, I will say that in the 4 instances when we have imposed a delay, it has not been a surprise. I mean, if you live in a historical house, you have some sense that you do.
Well, that's true. It was before
mean-
1929.
No, we've let a lot of houses go that were before 1929, right? Every one that we've let go and we've approved has been before 1929. So.
But if I
that's-
was living in 1950 or whatever, I'm not sure I would have any clue what was historical. Anyway, that's,
So that's.
Presumably, if you
I
wanted to
think-
tear it down, you'd do some investigation.
not anymore. So,
Anyway,
but I think
I'm-
these are reasonable questions.
They're
Right, and-
reasonable questions, and I was hoping for your support, so I'm sorry.
And it doesn't mean we don't support it. If we can get answers to those questions, you know, you can come back and we're all going to be at open hearing, so, you know, and we can come back and do this again. So we appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to move back to item 1.1, and that is, so unfortunately, this is our seat of honor here, or the hot seat, so it's, if you could,
So Mark gets penalized, right? For
Right.
being late, so he has to buy us coffee, is that the deal?
Absolutely.
you lost your audience. Well, we didn't want you to get a speeding ticket. So we're moving back to item 1.1, and item 1.1 is the notice of intent to lay out Stagecoach Lane as an accepted street, I guess? To just lay it out?
Street, yes.
Okay.
And so I'm Mark Howe, 54 Farm Street, and the company...
Do you want to move the mic maybe closer to you? You're very soft-spoken.
Depends who you, yeah.
There we go.
Depends.
Hi, I'm Mark Howe, and I live at 54 Farm Street, and I'm before you to request that Stagecoach Lane, which is off of Hartford Street, go in front of the town for approval to become a town road. We started it approximately 6 years ago, and there were originally 7 houses, and then the homestead, which the Kirbys owned and sold us the back property, were able to subdivide their property, so that gave us an 8th house. And then legally, what they did was take the homestead and change off their driveway from Hartford to Stagecoach. So you've got 9 houses.
Okay. And I know there's criteria, so the development is completed.
And that's all been...
And I'm going to get the terms all wrong, and then there's a top coat that has to go over to the road once everything's completed.
And that's all been done.
And highway department has inspected all that.
Highway department has inspected it, the planning board has all the
Okay.
plans, they've got all the materials. This is the first step to get you to town meeting for the acceptance.
Okay. All right. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, please.
All right, so then I move to provide the owners of the properties of Stagecoach, it's a...
Lane.
Yeah, you couldn't make it a shorter name. Lane and abutters within 300 feet
Can I-
of Stagecoach Lane of the Selectmen's intent to lay out Stagecoach Lane at its meeting on March 12th, 2020 at 6:30.
Did you want to add something before we?
Yeah, do you?
I was just going to say, the reason Stagecoach was that the house at the corner of Hartford and
I'm familiar with the house.
Walpole.
Right.
So they used to, I was told that they used to take the carriages from the toll house and bring them down to that parcel and
Okay.
let the horses rest and take the carriages down.
Very nice.
So moved.
I actually drove down the street recently because I knew this was coming up.
Oh, good.
All in favor?
Aye.
I drove by it many times, but I drove down it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you, Mark.
Okay, bye-bye. Take care.
So the next item, Mr. Lane, you're up. Oh, no, did I mess up?
No.
Never mind, never mind.
Jerry.
Sorry,
The other Jerry.
it's Hale. No, it's Jerry. I'm moving way ahead. I have check marks next to everything. I apologize, Mr. Clark, you're up.
Madam Chair, 1.5.
Right. I got carried away moving through the agenda.
That's how we get done so quickly.
Right.
Good evening.
So for those of you who are on my agenda, which is 2 items ahead, we are now on agenda item 1.5, not 1.7. So, Mr. Clark.
The Board of Health put on the town warrant in anticipation of 2 possible different articles. I'll go to the first one, which is going to be very simple, and that is the 2016 drought resulted in numerous citizen complaints to, I'm sure, many town offices, certainly to the Board of Health, over the fact that there was no action taken to see to the compliance that the state and the state's Department of Environmental Protection had required as to reducing the amount of outdoor irrigation. Now, those were state laws, it wasn't town. But the fact was, at that time, the town had then, and to this day still, has no legal mechanism to even address the question. Now, that was brought forward to you recently when Colonial Water Company came before you about 2 months ago, I believe it was, and you questioned the Colonial Water Company on why they were tolerating or even instigating the excessive use of water, which runs in their case and in the Springdale Water Trust, which is also owned by them, to nearly twice what they're allowed to do in the 8-month period during which irrigation occurs. And if you remember, when you questioned Colonial personnel, they turned the tables on you and said, we, Colonial, can't do anything. We look to the town. Perhaps you remember that.
I do.
Mr. Jeffries remembers that. So, this has been a year, I'm sure we're all aware, that we have no snow cover. We've had almost no snow cover all year, this winter. And the snow cover is critical to the reestablishment of the groundwater and the water on which many of the wells in this town depend. So we have been attending the state's Drought Management Task Force meetings for 2 years now, as well as the Massachusetts Water Resource Commission, the major state body responsible. It's a consortium of more alphabet soup than you can believe in the state. And the Drought Management Task Force issued a revised drought management plan, which we provided to you when they issued it at the end of October this past year. It had taken a lot of work to convince the members of the committee to pay attention to that 10% of the Commonwealth that is not on MWRA nor on municipal water systems or major commercial water systems. And the plan now carries in it a model bylaw for small towns to implement, to provide authority. Last year, we discussed this with you, and the truth of the matter was we weren't ready. We hoped to have the hydrology report deliverable by now in order to have a public meeting or two, public hearing on it, so as to explain all of this. As you know, there was a period in September and early October where a delay occurred, unfortunately, and we are therefore about 6 weeks behind. So we're not prepared to release that report yet, and it would be the support for this article, for this bylaw.
How about I'm sorry, can I? Do you want to finish? Do you have more to go, Jerry?
Well, I'm just saying to you, I want to make sure you understand that we will feel it almost obligated to bring it back before you next year. Because, as you heard from Colonial, they view themselves...
Okay, Mr. Clark, today we're not debating Colonial. I completely agree. You know, we set up the water committee, and the purpose of the water committee, in which you're a member, and I see there are other members here, was to do that Kleinfelder report. And that report is going to provide us with the evidence that we need to have support to make a bylaw change. So I think what I'm hearing is what you're saying is it's the committee's recommendation to hold off another year until you have the report.
That is correct.
And I commend
the draft
that
report
decision.
in its current phase, I think, if it were in a shape to be released and then openly discussed with meetings, I do think there would be support, but we're not ready yet. I think we'll have to wait until we have done that, and you will see what it says. And I do believe that there'll be considerable support at that time. So we intend on Monday night at the Board of Health meeting, I'm going to recommend to the members of the Board of Health that we withdraw this one article.
So Article 21.
If that's, I don't remember the number.
And I think that's a very wise decision, because I think the report provides credibility for what we're trying to do.
Now, the second article we had last year, but we withdrew it because town council at the time indicated that there was confusion and question as to whether or not there was another means of providing authority to pursue the cases of individual homeowners or well installers or septic installers who did not comply with either state regulations or town regulations. So we had discussions last year, and it became clear we weren't ready to convince town council at the time. This year, we've had Michael Angeri, who is the septic installer, Felix Zemmel, who is the well agent, myself, Steve. We've had extensive multiple meetings with town council, who now agrees. And there are basically two mechanisms, but I want to tell you why this is going on. I have, I feel almost like a certain late senator from Wisconsin holding papers in his hands and saying, I have here in my hands, but I do. These are just a sampling of the letters that we have written to homeowners. This first one is a case of someone who doesn't have a working Title V, has not had one. It's a major property on Dedham Street. The letters have been going out. This one is dated May 2019. There were earlier ones. Here's another one, December 2019. Failed system, no action. Here's another one, November 2019. Distribution box not functioning.
So Jerry?
June 2019. And it just goes back and back. And these letters are ignored, and at the moment, the only mechanism we have is to put a lien on the property, which is of no particular impact. Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 40U, is a rather peculiar law. It was written to deal with snow removal from sidewalks. Except someone slipped into the back of it a totally separate authority specific to boards of health to enforce their citations, civil citations, of violation of either state or municipal bylaws or regulations. But we would have to adopt it.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. I have two questions. So, and again, this is just, I'd really like to understand the scope of the problem.
Yes.
How many incidents are we talking about where moving to an enforcement position would be warranted? And number two, I would like to know, because I think people are going to ask the question, what's the mechanism for enforcing, and how do we actually work this thing through to the end? How does it work?
The civil mechanism would be to commence issuing
Who's the we?
Board of Health.
Okay.
Issuing the existing fine structure that is in the town code, and to ask that, lacking adherence to this,
Right.
we would bring it to the district court, civil matter.
We, again, the Board of Health.
Well, the town council, yes. If you're asking how many, well, I've got a stack here of about 11 that we pulled.
I think it'd be a good
in the
number to
past
have
year.
an open hearing.
I'm sorry?
I think it would be a good number to have at open hearing.
Oh, I understand, but I yanked these today.
I got it.
There are some here that I won't even, you've heard my story about, there's one person
Yep.
who for 3.5
Right.
years.
So we're really tight on time. this
Okay,
evening.
so that is the intent. The alternative is far less palatable, but doesn't require any action further by the town. And that is Massachusetts Housing Court was expanded a year ago, January, to include all of Massachusetts and specifically Dover. And the Commonwealth of Massachusetts regulations were expanded to specifically expand the authority of the Board of Health to take criminal action, which obviously we don't want to do. But when you have someone who has been sitting on a house where the hydrogen sulfide odor in the house is almost beyond belief, and they do not want to deal with it, or someone who bought a house, had engineer and installer come in, put in 2 septic systems, and has refused to pay them, and has demanded that the Board of Health make payment to the vendors. I think you get a sense of the problem.
Yeah, I do. It's just understanding how we actually do something that we can work through
Mm-hmm.
from, the enforcement thing from soup to nuts and
Okay,
and actually
We
resolve some of these issues.
We walked
And-
through
and-
this
and
with town
also-
council, and I'm sure we can have town council document what she
Okay.
understands to be the process.
You know, the bigger issue is, how is it going to be enforced? What violations are going to be enforced?
There's one other thing you haven't asked, and why is this a growing problem? And I
Well, I
think,
don't know if it's a growing
well,
problem.
it is, it is,
Because
it
you
is.
haven't-
That's
And
the
it-
problem.
Well, and it is specifically, as the state has authorized new types of septic systems that would not have been available some years ago, and therefore there are many lots which would not have been buildable. They are now buildable. You've probably heard that we have opportunities for, instead of having a 5-foot distance or 4-foot distance to groundwater, now it's 2 foot. You see mounded systems, you see fan blower systems, all of these. They all require maintenance. The DEP requires that the manufacturer's maintenance be done. It can be a $500 a year maintenance bill. Many homeowners simply choose not to do it.
So
But-
this is
but
great
clearly-
information.
But clearly, there's no violation. They can still live in the homes.
Oh, no,
So
there
why
is.
don't
I'm sorry. There is DEP requires the maintenance. We require the maintenance.
No, but-
There's a lien set on the property deed
so-
requiring the maintenance.
So then when the seller when the seller goes to sell the house, the problem has to get rectified. That's the ultimate
But your issue is
solution.
the water loss in the time of ownership is
And-
no way to be
I mean,
recouped.
Michael and I were talking yesterday about this, that you're running the risk in the one case of the one house we were talking about, it becomes uninhabitable.
So, Jerry,
In another case where you're getting percolation up through the soil.
Can I suggest that when you do come back to open hearing, the 2 things that I'd really like to hear, the Drought Management Task Force, what do they recommend for compliance?
They have nothing to do with it.
What, didn't you start with,
There were 2 different articles.
Two different articles.
So article
The
number
first
1.
one's been
The first one
withdrawn.
was the water use.
is going to be withdrawn?
But
right.
just for
But
your-
can you go, is there, for the second article, is there a similar recommendation? Is there some form of recommendation that you have?
Well,
or you've
it is
seen?
to adopt Mass General Law 40U. It would be with a recommendation from town council, or at least town council documenting the process.
From a
And we would,
compliance,
I'm sorry,
for compliance.
for
Well,
compliance.
you need to make sure that it's not, we need to make sure that there are no unintended consequences
Correct.
of adopting 40U.
Correct.
Mr. Repetti, do you have a
Yeah, I
question?
just wanted to interject for a second. This is a very complex issue, and the town meeting acts as a legislative body, Jerry, as you very well know. The open warrant hearing is really the equivalent of a House Ways and Means hearing.
Right.
The financial aspects are primarily focused on. Given the technicalities that are involved with this issue and some of the difficulties about making policy decisions as to which enforcement mechanisms you're going to pursue, I would suggest having a hearing that's run by the Board of Health, inviting all citizens so that you could receive some testimony and have a discussion about, first, to educate the public, and secondly, to solicit view or perspectives about which way would be the best way to proceed. And the reason I'm suggesting this is I think that this is too complex to be considered in a one-evening town meeting. And given the significance and the importance of the issues that you're identifying, I think that it's vital that the town be educated ahead of time so that we can make an informed decision about how to proceed. So if possible, I would suggest that you think about that.
I think that would be an excellent suggestion, and I think we should see if town council can attend that meeting as well.
That's very comparable to what our plans had been for relative to the irrigation. And as I said to you, the problem there was we're up against the gun on getting that report complete, and we've gone through 3 edits now.
Right, but the you know, the benefit of having that report is it's an independent, you know, qualified consultant that.
Well, understood, but what we were then going to have an open hearing or 2.
Or 3.
To explain that one, because that one turns out to be complex also.
Right, and we'll have, but, you know, for that one, we'll have a full year to be able to do the education.
And also, to Bob's question, to Mr. Springett's question, the scope of the problem, it would be extremely helpful if you are able to somehow quantify that. We know, as you described earlier, we know that there's overpumping. We know. There are things that we know.
I think you're mixing up the two.
No, I want to go back to your second, the in topic, to Bob's point, the scope of the problem.
Yep.
Right.
Okay.
No,
Yep,
and
certainly.
I think that's most important. And then I agree with Mr. Rapetti. It's a very, very complex issue. And my concern is, as always, are unintended consequences of passing something without understanding the
Or
ramifications.
not passing something that should, because.
Right, exactly.
You know, the open hearing really is not designed nor intended to achieve some agreement on these major policy issues. Those are issues that really should be decided before it comes to the warrant, in town warrant, and to the open hearing, because technically our warrant committee is the equivalent, other towns call it the finance committee. And the focus is on financial issues. So I think it would be very helpful, and Robin points out the whole issue of unintended consequences. It would be very helpful if you could conduct, you know, as you did previously, I guess a few months ago, with respect to some of the waste disposal issues that you identified. I thought
That was very helpful.
Very worthwhile endeavor on your part, and I would recommend that you pursue the same here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I wasn't expecting to go through all of this detail because I know you're time constrained today.
Right.
Well, thanks. Thank you
But
very
we
much.
will attend your open hearing.
Okay. It's one of those meetings where some of the discussion will be less than...
Desirable.
Yes.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
So now the next item of business is 1.6, and it's the Hale Task Force recommendation slideshow presentation. So if the task force could sit in the hot seat, if you so choose, there are 4 seats. No.
You had to know the answer, right? I mean, you had to know.
So we have some background information that we wanted to share. Amy Moot, 10 Glen Street, part of the Hale Task Force that was created by the Board of Selectmen earlier this year, to assess the opportunity that Hale has approached the town with to purchase a conservation restriction on a portion of their 1,200 acres, the 652 acres that are in Dover. As I think you all know, a conservation restriction is a legal agreement between the landowner, which in this case would be Hale, and the town or a land trust, to permanently protect the conservation values on the property by defining the allowed uses. And the fee ownership stays with the landowner. The maintenance responsibility and the use of the property stays with the landowner. In most cases, CRs require public benefit, and in most cases, the public benefit is some form of public access, and that would be the case in this one as well. And we're just at the beginning process. This is a multi-step process, and this is the very beginning. We've been meeting for a few months, but we have a lot more work to do. Just a little bit of background on the opportunities. I said Hale has come to the town to see if they would acquire a conservation restriction on 652 acres of Hale. Hale is roughly half in Westwood and half in Dover, and they're coming to this as a partnership. This is not a threat that Hale would develop, but this is an opportunity for us to take on this conservation restriction proactively. And so the Board of Selectmen over the summer put together the task force, and we've been meeting for a few months.
So I think it's important to let people know, I mean, Hale is not coming to the town to purchase the full, Hale would like to put a CR on the full property.
Correct.
They're working with the town of Dover and the town of Westwood. And it's a partnership in the sense they aren't looking at just the town of Dover and the town of Westwood to fund this. They are looking at the town of Dover and Westwood to potentially participate in the funding with multiple other parties. There's going to be an extensive capital campaign as well.
Right.
So it's not just looking to the town of Dover. Right, right. And so basically an endowment is, you're trying to create an endowment for the property.
An endowment for the organization.
For the organization.
Right.
And as well as increase their ability to deliver some programs and improve facilities on the property as well. And they have gone through an extensive strategic planning exercise and identified, as you know, about $40 million worth of need. And as Robin has said, that need has been segmented. They expect that the fundraising is going to be about 50% private from foundations and individuals, and about 50% from public sources, which would be the towns of Westwood and Dover.
And so, Amy, it's my understanding that the 40 million, so part of the strategic plan was to identify ways of raising enough money to continue to do the programs and offer the services at Hale reservations that have been ongoing.
Correct.
Right? Correct.
And expand them,
where
as was
possible.
appropriate,
Right.
given the results that they've managed to create with some of their new innovative educational
Right. And
techniques.
because I think they were concerned about their own financial viability, right, going forward.
As well, they also
Okay.
do not currently have much of
Money.
an endowment.
Yeah, so just for the
About $1
audience.
million, maybe a little bit less today than they had yesterday. And they have over a $3 million operating budget, so that really doesn't give them very much runway should this turn out to be a significant recession. It will be difficult on them going forward, and this, if they complete this capital campaign, they will have the sustainability both from a financial standpoint to continue to be around as long as the conservation restriction is, which is
In perpetuity.
in perpetuity. Correct.
So one of the questions that may be raised is as part of fundraising, is Hale looking at other types of ways to raise money rather than just go to nonprofit organizations and to the towns? Are you looking to see if potentially there is some of the land that may be viable for development and using some of those proceeds to help putting
Well,
the CR?
that's part of the assessment. That's part of the process. That's the part of the process that the task force is going through. The first thing, we've gone through a number of different steps. We've looked at, we've gotten an overview of Hale from the staff, and we've discussed the proposal. We've done some modeling as to, what the tax impact would be to the average Dover citizen, different ways it could be financed or structured, just to give us a level set to see if it was even remotely possible. We've reviewed the CR appraisals that have been done for Hale in the past. They've had 2 of them done.
For the entire property?
For the entire property. And we've looked at whether other towns have done anything similar to this, just to make sure that we weren't embarking on something that was just not not doable at all.
Right.
And so we've come to the conclusion that we now need our own appraisal done to take into account
So when you
current
talk about
valuations.
Are we talking about
The
town of
task
Dover?
force.
The task force.
The task force.
Sorry to ask all these questions.
Yes,
but-
no, sorry. So the task force feels that among its next steps would be a Dover-led appraisal.
So
There's a
so can I
belief that
just-
Westwood is,
Can I just stop you there?
yeah,
So the task force is a Dover. Westwood task force. So the task
It's a
force is
Dover-
just Dover. So
yes.
when you're talking about an appraisal, is that just for the 600 acres of Dover land, or is it for the? I mean, how are you approaching this?
The ultimate goal is to understand the value of a conservation restriction on the 652 acres
That
In
belongs
Dover.
to.
that are in Dover. The way that the appraisal is done to end up with that number will be determined really by speaking with appraisers and understanding the best way to do that. Westwood also has a task force and is also moving towards getting an appraisal, and there may be some economies of scale in working with Westwood on an appraisal, and we will certainly pursue that to save money, but we want to make sure that we have the resources to do our own appraisal should that not happen. We should know before town meeting, and maybe even before the open hearing, whether Westwood has funded their appraisal, and therefore whether or not we can reduce our estimate, our cost estimate and our budget. But at the moment, we believe that it would be about $50,000, because we also want to make sure that we have enough in the budget to accommodate sort of Dover's special circumstances in terms of our water resources and our other regulations that may impact the developability of the lots, and therefore the appraisal value.
So when I looked at the presentation, I was a little bit confused about the task force, and whether it was Dover and Westwood. And it was very unclear
Okay.
to me as to whether this $50,000 was for an appraisal on the entire parcel, because I think, town meeting is for the town of Dover, so I think you need to make it clear that this portion of the appraisal is for the 52 acres that are in Dover, so that was unclear to me. Secondly, when you do appraisals, there are many uses for land, and I think, what we're focusing on here certainly is a conservation restriction, but I think it's also important to understand, and I don't know how the appraisers go about this, but it's also important to understand the value of the land with not just a conservation restriction on it. It doesn't mean that that's what you're gonna do, but I think it's important that when the appraiser gives the appraisal, that's
actually how you
Okay,
end up
perfect.
with the
Okay.
number for
Okay.
the CR is you take the highest and best use, the developed,
So different scenarios.
Right.
the two scenarios, one developed, one with the
Okay.
value of it when the
Okay.
CR's on it, and you take the difference
Right.
between those, and that's the value of the CR. So yes, the fully developed value will be calculated as well. And because of the largeness of the lot and the way it's laid out, you probably have to look at the whole thing in order to understand that highest and best use. But
That's the
like I
appraiser's
said,
problem.
but that's the appraiser's problem, right? But you probably get a valuation for the entire project. And that's why it makes sense to partner with Westwood on it, because they need that whole top highest and best use number as well. And then in addition to getting an appraisal, we will continue to be looking at the things that don't cost money, like working with Dover citizens and different organizations, Park and Rec, Council on Aging, and all, to understand what their needs are, whether there are possibly any non-monetary or non-CR related things that Hale could add to this deal to make it more attractive for Dover and its citizens. And we'll also be looking at other funding sources, matches and things like that from the state to reduce the impact of the ultimate purchase price should we decide to go forward with this. But this funding and appraisal doesn't mean that we're necessarily going forward.
It's just the next step.
It's just the next step in trying to understand the opportunity. It seems like it's possible, so we'd like to move forward to understand a little bit more about it.
Right, and that's, and that's a key point to make. It's important to get the information to make an informed decision. And just because you're asking for funds to do an appraisal doesn't mean, the project will move forward. It's just the one step to make an informed decision.
Right.
And that's what we're trying to do, and that's why we want to make sure that we have all the I's crossed, all the I's dotted, all the T's crossed, so we can make an informed decision. And that's what I was struggling with when I looked at this presentation, because the ask at town meeting is for an appraisal, and the whole front of the presentation is about, Hale and the conservation
Well-
restrictions and what you're trying to do. And I
Yep.
understand the reason for that, but I'm struggling when I have my town, my Board of Selectmen hat on, and I'm trying to find ways to make town meeting more efficient. I'm just not sure if there's a compromise position here, because I think it is important to tell the story, to begin to let people know what you're trying to do, but.
Yeah, I think,
And this
I
is
mean,
just my feedback for
yeah,
you to take
no, I'm
back
just
to-
trying, because
back to the task force.
I have an even less wordy version of
Okay.
it for,
So my
that
only-
we're taking, we've come down from about 15 slides
Oh, I
to
know, but the
5.
hardest thing is to get the point across
And
that
we
you want to
could
make.
probably get, I mean, it depends also on how much we feel, or you feel that we can rely on, a 1 or 2 page handout giving people information about Hale itself in the town meeting, because I think, I mean, we could eliminate one whole slide here and quite a bit if we could just, if people actually knew a little more about Hale, but it's almost the best kept secret in Dover is that we have all this land that many people actually think is trustees.
Or Westwood.
Or Westwood. or-
Well,
yes.
they think Hale is in Westwood, but they think all of Hale's land in Dover belongs to the trustees
Right.
because the trails are so interconnected and so deep.
Yeah.
The land is so deeply intertwined that I think that we miss.
So when we first started hearing about this and talking to people, it would really make a great deal of sense if you could put together a small pamphlet or a handout that talked about the proposal. Because the proposal that I heard, the proposal that I heard,
They think they're.
There
was
are-
very clear, and it outlined what Hale is, what the proposal, what the proposition is, et cetera, et cetera. That'd be a great thing
Okay.
for people to have as a handout
Your
at town
first
meeting. Or, and it-
presentation. Yeah, no,
Was
this is.
Supporting materials to the presentations, I think what we can do is merge the presentation and some of what's
Yeah,
here, just to provide that.
I don't know, my recommendation again, because town meeting, we're just supposed to be voting on the warrant articles, and the warrant article here is $50,000
Right.
for an appraisal, and I really suggest that that's what we focus on. And that's just my opinion. Mr. Repetti, I don't know. I'm trying to get
I guess
town
the
meeting
question
to be-
is, do you think we need to, I feel,
think
I'm
you need,
struggling
like,
with this,
I-
that
so am I.
we
I'm just
need
giving you
to-
advice. I'm
we
not
need
gonna
to
do
say
it.
that they came to us with a proposal for a conservation restriction and give them a little bit of information
Right.
about what the task force
Yes.
has done to
Right.
come to the conclusion that
Right,
they need an appraisal.
because it is the task force recommendation. So that would be good, but I think we need to do it in 2 slides. And then,
Yeah.
and then.
No, we
right.
can do it in,
So again, I don't have a ton of
You need to do
experience
the-
doing
You're
this.
saying,
3
you're
slides
suggesting you
anyway.
need to do the preamble in
Yeah.
2 or 3 slides.
well, I think.
Mr.
we-
Repetti, do you have a,
I think three slides might, or even 4, you'll have 8 minutes
right,
to make
Right.
the presentation. And I think that some background about the underlying objectives that you were hoping to accomplish, a little bit of an explanation of what a conservation easement is, and how the appraisal is taking a difference between the full value and the value reduced by virtue of the easement would be helpful to understand the appraisal process. Beyond that, I haven't seen what you have now, but beyond that, it seems to me that if you hit those 3, that
right,
that
I
would be pretty
completely agree,
helpful.
right.
Right.
Well, I would come back. The other thing that we did on the Carroll project a year ago was we put together 20 FAQs and handed them out at town meeting, and I got a lot of feedback from that saying it was really helpful.
So,
Okay,
to
so
the
people are
extent-
gonna, that's one of the questions, was whether or not you felt like people, if we did all the background on hail and/or on the actual opportunity and gave it out, would that?
I think that,
It's
I think to the extent that you
who
can.
knows, right,
Well, no,
right,
you're
who
talking about
knows?
informing people who probably have a very low awareness
Mm-hmm.
of these issues. So to the extent that you can do that, to the extent, as we suggested to Mr. Clark, that you hold an information session for people,
Yeah, no, we
Um,
were gonna do one.
those kind of things would be
yeah.
very, very helpful. And then you can assume that there's at least reasonable knowledge when you get
Yeah.
to town meeting.
I'd also, Amy, remind that one of the things that we discussed at length with the task force is that people are limited through their own biases of what they use or what they see.
Right.
And what their expectations are. And I think the one thing that the task force has been extremely impressed by Hale is what else is there. The amount of use and the amount of accessibility that Hale has. The amount of accessibility that Dover has in its current form.
Collateral
The
material.
amount of,
The way we use it, the way we
oh, the way
utilize
that
it.
the number of counselors and the
Residents.
number of
Residents.
visitors.
Residents use it, how residents don't know.
Dover residents.
Yeah, people don't know which is Hale and which isn't Hale.
Oh, no, I understand
And
that.
we use the properties all the time, so.
Yeah. And,
Sorry.
I just one other thing, I just wanted to mention, Amy, if you don't mind, if you could send Felicia and me the slides 1 week before town meeting, that would be really helpful, because I need to review them just very
Yeah.
quickly for content, and Felicia needs to make sure that they'll be properly put into our
Mhm.
computer system. So
yeah,
that'd be
and
helpful.
there's a good chance I'm not the one who's presenting. We're just, it's probably gonna either be John or Bill or both, or, because everybody knows me as the open space
Okay.
queen,
Yeah, the open
so.
hear- the open hearings are
It will
great.
be, but it would be if people see me presenting, they'll assume that the decision's
the
already
decision's
made, that
made,
we're
right.
going forward with this. So we don't want
Okay.
that, because the decision hasn't been made.
The open hearing is a great opportunity for a dress rehearsal.
Right, so that's why
Presentation.
and we're this and Warren.
Felicia, do you have a question?
I just wanted to also say that if you're looking to put a handout together and you want it distributed, let me know that ahead of time.
Yep.
So we make sure that we're ready and we're expecting it. We can help you get that out of town meeting, and if you have a handout.
We will have a handout for the warrant, for the
Exactly.
open hearing.
And you may refine that before town meeting if you
Maybe,
can.
yeah.
But it's just
Yeah.
a really helpful thing when you have a lot of information to disseminate for people to read it as well as hear it.
Yeah.
Right, and one of the things we're gonna do, because it was successful last year, and we think people actually utilize this tool, was we're gonna set up a town meeting page on the website with each of the warrant articles, and we'll put informational material on there,
Great.
so citizens can go to the website to get additional information and educate themselves for town meeting.
Can I just add
Yeah.
that? So as a citizen who knows a little bit what's going on and has been talking to Hale since you first started thinking about this 2 years ago, but has not been involved at all in the task force. So I'm a little bit confused. So if I'm confused, maybe you need to
Yeah.
focus a little bit more. So I don't understand the $50,000. Is that your estimated cost for an appraisal of the Dover piece of the property or the entire Hale Reservation?
It's our estimate of the appraisal requirement for the CR for the Dover half. In order to get that, you probably need to appraise the entire property and then appraise at least the Dover half as protected.
So are we
But-
paying for an appraisal that Westwood will also be able to use? Or are they
No.
going to pay for half of the appraisal?
We, assuming that Westwood goes forward with an appraisal, we will combine our forces and have one appraisal done and split the cost.
So that needs to be really clear.
If,
Well, exactly.
and
I'm very
by, well, because we don't know for sure that Westwood's gonna do it, but we
So
will
what
know.
happens if Westwood doesn't?
Well, an
Westwood
appraisal
doesn't,
belongs
then
to
we will
the,
need the $50,000 to
So if
do.
Westwood doesn't do it, you're gonna ask Dover citizens to pay for Westwood?
no,
to save
no,
the money?
Carol,
No,
an
no, no,
appraisal
because-
belongs to the entity that's paying
Pay
for it.
for it. The appraisal, no, in order, it's, in order to, we are only paying for an appraisal on the Dover CR. The reality is that in order to understand what the developed.
Well, we don't know
We don't-
that. We're making
We
an
don't-
assumption of
we
what the
assume
appraiser
that
needs to
the
know.
appraiser would go to the whole thing, but they might not.
But you're not,
We
I
don't
mean,
know.
we're-
But we are the aim is to get an appraisal on the CR for Dover.
right, so,
Okay.
so I think not to confuse issues, that's
Yeah.
all we need to say.
Okay.
We're looking to get an appraisal. You know, it's not up to us to decide the methodology that the appraiser's gonna use. I'm sure they've done this many times, and they'll figure out how to come up with a value for the Dover CR. And I think that's really important.
We're not asking for Dover to pick
No.
up what would be Westwood's
No.
cost if they
Right.
say that.
Probably what made it more confusing is that Westwood is also going through the
Yeah, no, I
same
understand, that's
process.
why I got confused.
And there could be economies
And-
of scale.
Oh,
if
of course,
we-
there's no absolute.
And we will
Okay.
I
probably
would
end up.
say that we should keep in mind that the two sides are extremely different. Westwood has
Right.
water and sewer, and we do not. Westwood has zoning that's smaller lot sizes, so they really are very different
different.
pieces
Right.
of property.
Right, and even the terrain's a little bit different, so. which
Yeah,
is
no,
gonna-
they are very different pieces of property, and it's possible that, you know, they'll be two
Yeah.
completely
Things are
separate.
gonna change.
The target will be to
It's just that
to use the best methodology to appraise.
to get the
those
correct
for Dover.
Value
price
for Dover.
for Dover's CR.
Got it.
Right.
Okay.
But, you know, people are just gonna jump on things, so you
Yeah.
need to be,
Yep.
when, whoever makes the presentation, just make clear that it's for Dover
Dover.
only. Don't opine on how the appraisal, it's up to the
Don't-
appraiser
I agree.
to use his
Okay.
or her methodology, because they have guidelines and methodologies
Yep.
that they have to. And that's why we're gonna get a certified appraiser and get a certified report. And the report's gonna be for the use of the town of Dover only.
You auditioning?
No, I get valuations all the time. I know the
I know,
rules,
I know.
so,
And for clarification.
right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Who's gonna keep me honest now?
Everybody.
Mr. Lane, I think you're up.
Stephen, thank you. Eric, thank you.
27.
Thank you.
I stopped just checking agenda items
No,
off
I
because
got
it
it,
got me
I got
into
it.
trouble.
I got it, brother. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. This is my return appearance on ambulance rates. You had a memo that you should have had in your packet.
Right.
That showed what the Comstar median is, and we are definitely pretty far off from that. And I also was able to get a survey that was available to you.
Okay.
So I think it's safe to say the rates haven't really been adjusted up in a while. So we probably should think about it, because if you look
Are
at
you
the
gonna make a
survey,
recommendation?
we're at the very bottom. And Comstar, if we gave an estimate of, if we went to the median, would bring in about another $43,000 worth of revenue, so.
And that would offset the cost of providing the service, right?
Right, that would make more money available for the cost of running the ambulance.
Right, okay.
Because technically, right now, we don't really tie those two together as much as some places do.
Okay.
And so, if you were thinking about it, I would say something on the order of, double the rates, which puts you sort of right in the ballpark of that median. If you feel more comfortable saying, well, this was the median of the group we're in, let's go to that median. I think either of those options.
Could you phase it in over a couple of years? 'Cause that's a big jump.
Yeah, you could phase it in if you wanted to. You could say, 50% this year, we're planning on 50% next year. I mean, it's up to the board to set the rate that they feel that is right for the town.
Okay.
And in any event, it's the Medicare rate, right? And so,
A big proportion of the usage is on Medicare,
Right.
Medicaid patients.
And that doesn't
And that's not going to change. We're already up above that number.
right.
And so it will be the other insurance companies, so the Harvard Pilgrims and the Tufts and whatnot, that would be paying for, their insureds. Or, some people are getting paid
And they're
through.
paying these rates at other towns.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
We
the,
just sort of, we haven't looked at it.
Right.
So why are we above the Medicare rate if all we're gonna get is the Medicare rate?
For Medicare
well,
patients.
because we only
Medicare
have a rate. We don't have a Medicare rate and you've got private insurance rate. So
Medicare's just going to reimburse you their
you're
rate.
going to get their number
And you
and
write
wipe
the
out
rest
everything
off.
else.
Right.
But if you want to get more from the private insurance
You gotta have
carriers,
it.
you have to have a higher rate.
Okay,
You only have the rate.
one rate, Okay.
I would say let's just move to the median rate and,
1 year?
yeah.
Yeah, because you're going to get just billed.
And I think if there's an uninsured resident, we could,
You do end up writing off
Right.
each year
right,
what you don't get.
Right.
right.
We did that last time.
We did that last meeting. Yeah. $4,328.
No opinion? You okay?
All right.
Okay.
Do I have to pick a rate?
You need to, there needs to be a motion and a vote so we can fill in the
But there's
form.
like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 median rates here.
No, those are just for different services.
Okay.
So basic life support, advanced life support 2. So you could the motion could be you just move to accept the median rate.
Okay,
and
so
you
that's
can
what I'm going to
determine
read.
the median rate.
I move to set the 2020 ambulance rates to the median rate as set forth in the attached memorandum.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Lane.
Okay, we'll get that
Sorry
form
for
sent
keeping
in.
you around all night.
Right.
Thank you.
Jerry, thank you very much.
And now it's the highlight of the meeting.
The highlight of the meeting.
The slideshow presentation.
Should we turn the lights down, Chris?
You could dim them on that wall.
Okay.
It's coming into focus.
You guys might want to sit over here, Chris.
Are there other items that you want to take out of order?
The only thing left, I think, is the park.
Oh, did I mess up?
I mean, you can move the consent agenda. You don't have to, if you want to say something.
Yeah, tell me what to do? That's an excellent idea. While we're setting up the slideshow, let's do the consent agenda.
All right.
So the consent agenda
C1.
is to approve the change of the domain name from .org to .gov, approve the Conservation Commission insert the yard waste, which is something we've done, approve special liquor licenses for February 19th, which is retroactive, March 1st, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, August 16th, and October 17th, approve January 22nd and February 6th open meeting minutes, and approve November 6th, 21st, December 19th, and January 22nd executive session meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
All in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
All right. Excellent idea, Mr. Town Administrator.
So then we have a new laptop, and someone has applied a password to it that has not been distributed to folks. So
Okay.
I can.
Is it on the label on the cover?
I can.
Check the cover.
That's right.
The cover is. We're not.
There you go.
Yay.
Smart people in this room.
Great. Why have a password?
Password is on the cover.
It wasn't on the cover, he just remembered it. It's gonna get changed tomorrow.
And therein lies.
Oh. Now I know who to blame. Nice.
Uh-oh.
We haven't changed the
Two-party authentication.
domain yet.
So Chris, I had that same issue at the TAB meeting.
Part of my budget presentation talks about technology and technology in rooms, and
An operator
this
error.
is all part of it to convince you to fund it.
I think
Very well done.
we're against it. We want to go back to paper, quill pens.
Slides.
Yeah.
Those little white things you write with the black pen
That's
on
right.
the
It's not we
overhead
got rid
projector.
of we got rid of the grade school cart, you know, they used to get wheeled in.
Yeah, with the
During
that black pen.
I really like this picture. I don't know who took it, but
Is that historical?
Chris did.
Looks like the historical house.
All right, we're almost there.
and wait
That was
until
the
we.
back side of the house that got taken down.
Yeah,
on
that's
Farm
what,
Street.
that's what it
Yeah.
looks like, yeah.
Thank you for bearing with me.
You want us to do a couple more items, agenda items?
I don't think there's anything. Oh, why don't we do? Should we do a selectmen updates, or do you need more time?
Selectmen updates are fine.
Okay. All right. So let me get my agenda, which I've lost. All right, I'm good. So selectmen update. So I actually have an update to provide to people. I know it's a little late in the process, but most of you know my term is coming to an end this year. And it's taken, I've thought about it a lot, and there's a lot going on in town that I'd like to make sure continues to happen. And as a result of that, and a little bribery on the part of my family, I've decided to run again for re-election. So that's my news.
Terrific.
Congratulations.
Well, I do not have a rail trail update. Actually, Chris and I are going to meet with Friends of the Dover Greenway tomorrow, and so the next meeting I should have an update. And the only other item we have are upcoming agendas, unless either of you have any updates.
Did you say your family bribed you?
I had to bribe my family.
Yeah. I was going to ask the same
Family
question.
bribery.
Because I remember a different family member's discussion.
Right. So.
How much did you pay?
I'm not saying. So I don't have anything to add to the upcoming agendas.
Well, I would like to get discussion at one of the meetings around creating a sustainability council. So when we have the time to fit that in, that'll be a good thing to do.
Okay. Well,
Chris?
maybe the April 2nd meeting.
Yeah, it looks like either March or April.
Okay, well, I think March, things may come to a head with
Okay,
the
so
town
just-
meeting, so.
As a, okay. Are you ready?
I'm ready if the selectmen
We're ready.
have completed their updates.
We've
Please
completed
proceed.
our
Okay,
updates.
thank you. So, Adobe is not downloaded on this machine, so I can't open full screen, so you'll have to bear with me with the nice URL and my folder drive and some other excess around this screen. But I hope it'll only strengthen the case for one of the items that's included.
Is this strategic?
Included in our budget here, not intentionally, but it
Nice
might work
move,
out. It might
Chris.
work out well for us.
I would take credit.
Yeah.
Brilliant tactician.
So as we
And the apology is even.
Yep. As we get closer to town meeting, as we get close to open hearing, and as we get very close to getting all of our assessments in, which typically bookend your budget process, I wanted to provide the board and the community with an overall outlook of our upcoming fiscal year budget. Again, apologies, but this is what we have to do. So just to quickly recap for you the approach that the town and the staff have taken this year as it relates to the FY21 budget setting process. And some of these things are new, which is why I wanted to highlight them for you. So we transitioned over to a new financial system, which is Vadar Systems, which was used for our FY21 budget process. So all of our budget entries and departmental requests went in through this application, and it was a departure from an older, outdated application that we were running. So it was really a nice thing. And what we really look forward to be able to do moving forward is really leverage this new system to be able to provide more robust reports regularly and on demand for staff and for volunteers, and really for the public, so that they can really understand where their taxpayer dollars are being attributed to. We have also established a finance team internally, worked collaboratively on the budget development. And so as we talked about, or as we have talked about, not only the budget, but updates on the board goals. One of the things that we wanted to do was to really foster a collaborative environment here and to break down silos where we could. And not saying that there were silos in the past, but a collaborative approach toward development in all things finance is a good structure to have for municipal government.
Now, I know we've been running two systems.
We have been running two systems, so I really thank our treasurer and our accountant and our assessor for really having to juggle two systems simultaneously, which is no small feat.
Now, is that going to come to an end?
That will come to an end. Yep, that will come to an end.
When do you think, Chris?
When do I think?
Yep.
So we're gonna run the old system, since we ended up, because of the conversion, it took some time. So our books weren't closed for fiscal year 19 until about a few weeks ago.
Right.
So just out of an abundance of caution, we're going to run that system all the way through next fiscal year. It is included in the budget. It is a very, very small dollar. And frankly, it's certainly worth paying that than to have us to go back to find something and realize it's not there.
The workload on the staff will come down.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. We're just keeping the legacy system in place just in case something were to arise in the FY20 process. Yep. And then really just quickly, I'll just emphasize that, I was really impressed with staff here. We met regularly to really analyze each budget request for 21 and to look back at prior years and to really understand what is it that we truly needed. And in a prior budget update that I gave the board, we were able to either cut or level fund about 35 to 40% of our budget line items, which I think is a really great thing. So people weren't just arbitrarily saying, hey, you know what, I'd like a 5% increase across the board, but it was a detailed look at truly what was needed here in the community. And of course, your budget document really represents your goals, and I think that this does. So I wanted to provide you with a breakdown of the core components of your budget. So the first being revenues and what you've got to spend. So just a quick highlight, if we want to tax to the full 2.5%, you've got a little over $861,000 there. Our new growth has been pegged at $175,000 per the Board of Assessors. That is a conservative number. We ended last year with 304. Our local receipts, we are estimating an actual reduction over what was budgeted last year, and that being with the unknowns as it relates to the Carroll Community Center and the lease payments that we receive over there. We didn't feel comfortable in incorporating an anticipated revenue stream for FY21 with those unknowns. So we have taken that out. That represents about $80,000.
So the biggest piece is
the biggest piece is your motor vehicle excise on your local receipts.
Okay.
And then state aid is $42,000 and change. That's 2.5–3%, which we've seen over the past few years, for a total growth estimate of a little over $1 million. To go back to the local receipts, we talked about the community center and the unknown there. I did also want to highlight that in a departure from years past, we've estimated the rest of our local receipts at 90%, which is a more conservative number than we have in the past. We heard from folks that an analysis of our local receipts was important so that we weren't underinflating them going into the budget season. So, and we will continue to look at those, primarily the motor vehicle line, as our commitments come in for the year.
And again, Chris, the 42.8 in state aid is the increase.
That's the increase, correct. Yep, your new growth. Yep. So now on the expenditure side, I just wanted to really pull out two highlights: major cost increases that you see year over year, and any new cost increases that we are requesting this year. So schools, wages, pension, insurance, all of that. You see the overall number there, and I've got a breakdown in the following slide about what some of those assessments or how some of those numbers are made up. On the right-hand side, we've outlined the new cost increases that are within the operating budget. And again, I think these really reflect a lot of the community's goals. The first is around IT and ensuring that we've got applications in place that allow us to conduct our business efficiently and deliver the best customer service that we are able to, as well as ensuring just that website, cybersecurity, all these basic things that we need in place are in place. And all the other requests are related to staff, and this really has to do, as we look to it, has to do with ensuring that we have the people in place, again, to ensure that we have coverage across all of our entities. I like to give the instance in one operation, there's only one part-time staffer, so half of your work day every day, the office is closed, and that is a revenue generating department. And that's just from a revenue side, never mind a customer's service standpoint. So if someone comes into town hall at 10 a.m., assuming that the building or the office will be open, sometimes that's not the case just because of the number of staff that we have. So we've, I think, smartly looked at where we could leverage low dollar and low impact staff increases to really augment and really improve and increase our service delivery to the community.
So I think, on this point, people will look at it and say, well, $300,000, that's a really big number. But I think what's really important to recognize is for many, many years, we've been running short-staffed, and we haven't been able to keep up with the demands of our citizens and just the demands of certain functions within the townhouse. Like, for instance, a land use director. There are many land use projects that we react to rather than are proactive with. We have talked for 5 years about putting a housing production plan in place. We've talked about updating the master plan, and we just don't get to it because we can barely get through the tasks that we need to get through to meet the day-to-day operations. So as part of the Board of Selectmen's modernization efforts, we have asked the Board of Selectmen staff to look at the way we function in the townhouse and the needs, the things we need to do that we haven't gotten to, and this is the recommendation that came out of it. Also, we have also looked at ways to consolidate tasks and departments, so to speak, so to make sure that we're being very cost effective in the delivery of services. And we'll continue to do that.
So I just wanted to break down those major cost increases on the previous slide that you saw. These are really just the assessments, bills that we get. These are some of your more major lines. So just to highlight, you see health insurance, we're anticipating a 4% year-over-year increase. That is still an estimate at this point. Jerry was with our health insurance group provider, and they're close to finalizing those rates. 4% increase is pretty good. On our liability insurance, we're looking at a 2%. That's an estimate. Our retirement has been confirmed. Our assessment came in at a $101,000 year-over-year increase for 7%. The regional school systems has not finalized their budget yet, but we're looking at just under $500,000 estimated there at 4% year-over-year. And some good news, if it holds, is an actual reduction in our assessment for next year for the elementary school. So in total, as we look at the operating budget, we took some of the pieces and I just wanted to show for folks that our year-over-year total increase is 2.2%. And when you look at some of my counterparts in Norfolk County have provided me with their anticipated operating budget increases to date, and you see those range from a minimum of 2.5 to a maximum of 6.7 for an average of 3.9. And so a 2.2% increase for an operating budget is pretty good, especially if you keep in mind that if you keep within Prop 2.5, not saying that you go to the full, that this is certainly sustainable. And this is with all of the new added services that we're looking to be able to provide for the community.
Yeah, I think that given the order of magnitude of the work that has to be done, and making up for the equivalent of deferred spending, that's a pretty good outcome.
Second to last slide here. So again, just wanted to summarize. So our budget as proposed, we're actually not taxing to the full 2.5%. Right now, we're running about $315,000 in excess levy capacity. Budget, again, provides for all your core essential town services, addresses a lot of the community goals in the area of customer service, modernization, and succession planning. Fully funds all our contractual obligations. Fully funds the ARC for our other post-employment benefits, which is really great. And fully funds all the capital requests as requested and as I understand are confirmed to date from the Capital Budget Committee. So this really represents, for the most part, all of what we see to date. And again, I've just reiterated on this slide some of the additional services that you get with that. So the last piece I wanted to just touch on, and this is really separate from kind of your operating and your regular recurring budget, is around free cash. So very much like in the past, we are requesting a few one-time projects, one-time efforts, and that those efforts be funded with free cash. One is around technology implementation, and this $50,000 request is really just to add back to the special article that was voted on last town meeting for IT efforts, given all the work that we are doing to date and the anticipated work that we have in front of us. We thought it was prudent to kind of refresh that account, so to speak. The second piece, and this stems back to the earlier delay with our technology here, is around a town hall reconfiguration. So we are presently about to embark on a space needs assessment, and that will be a space needs assessment for the townhouse. It'll really assess our public meeting space, this room, the Great Hall, as well as individual workspace. And we're really doing that for two reasons. One is to help confirm what our anticipated space needs as it relates to staff are moving forward. As you'll recall, there's been a discussion about maybe needing 2,000 or 5,000 square feet over at the Carroll building. Right. And it's helpful to confirm whether or not we actually may need that or whether or not we can maintain present state and the future here in the townhouse or existing buildings.
So complementary with the Carroll Building Committee.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the other piece is, as you saw us, sitting here in a small room, we had overflow today with people sitting out in the hall. I think it's time for us to take a look at how we can really maximize our space here for the public's benefit, as well as staff space. So that's where that appropriation would go. The next is around organizational assessments, and this really builds off of the work that we've been doing this year to assess the town's operational and organizational structure as we embark on and are close to finalizing an initial phase of what will be a public works department, or would get you to a public works department. This money really allows us to go out and partner with consultants and other experts that can analyze certain facets of the operation and really help us build a recommendation. This is very much in the same vein of the financial management review that we're undertaking with the DOR, though fortunately that assessment is free.
Couldn't find any other free ones?
The next item is water infrastructure repair. So this is bubbled up no pun intended, over the past few months about how the town owns the water infrastructure around the town square that Colonial's using to deliver water service to customers. We presently don't have a capital fund or reserve to pay for any repairs, maintenance, or catastrophic events. And we thought, while we have conversations about what the future looks like for that, we thought it'd be prudent to set aside some money in the inevitable case that something does occur. The next piece is, you heard from the Hale Task Force this evening. This is the $50,000 that they had mentioned as it relates to the appraisal. And the last piece is a placeholder, and this is for a petitioned article related to the school start time. One of the articles that the petitioners are looking for is to conduct a traffic study. This $15,000 I've used here is just a placeholder.
And it's our estimate. We
and it's
charge
our,
them
and
with
it's
getting
our
right.
estimate, absolutely. But for overall budget purposes, I wanted to have at least some placeholder in there. So those are the one-time projects that we'll be looking at this year. And I just wanted to highlight for folks, we are approaching this a little bit differently than in years past. Traditionally, the community has just raised everything that they wanted to spend against the levy and then plugged in free cash after the fact to make sure that you're within that levy ceiling. This year, we're changing that, and we're really taking out those one-time projects and making sure that they're funded with one-time funds, which is the guidance from the state and the best practices across the board. And I've highlighted on the right here as to kind of some of the other added benefits of doing that. So, and the last piece I'd leave you with is that there's a great effort here in the community about identifying financial reserve policies and ensuring liquidity and financial stability for years and decades to come. And that work, being led by a task force, is coming pretty close to an end, and they anticipate having a recommendation within the next week or so, certainly something at open hearing as to what the recommended approach is for the community moving forward. That's
Terrific.
it.
Thank you.
All right.
But I don't see that money on there for my TCO, my program.
Yeah. Maybe just a point of clarification. Does the board typically, I guess, when does the board typically vote to support the budget? Would that be this evening before?
We can actually, because technically the warrant committee is supposed to make their recommendation to us.
So we'd wait for that.
Right.
They make a recommendation?
Yes, yes, yes.
Oh, on the selectmen's budget?
Well, they make a recommendation on the overall.
So we have typically voted the selectmen's budget really early, but this year what we decided to do was to understand the totality of the budget. So maybe the next meeting, we can just formally vote the selectmen's budget?
Yeah, whatever
Yeah,
the board's ready.
okay.
That's it. It's too late, we're not taking any more questions, Jim.
Okay.
Quick question, maybe I missed it in the draft warrant, but I can't find the water infrastructure warrant article that's allocating free cash for that. Where is that, Chris?
Yeah, it's the one-time article. It's Article 16 in the draft that we were working off of yesterday.
Oh, it's for the one-time project?
Yep.
But it doesn't refer to water. I mean, my draft just has technology-related projects for $50,000, townhouse space reconfiguration for $100,000, and organizational assessments for $150,000.
Yeah. So the last draft that I sent to the group included this. So I guess you could pencil in at the end there.
Okay.
Water main.
I just wanted to make sure it was in there because
So part of what brought that was we have had a number of water leaks over the last month or so, and it's becoming a concern. We really have no idea on the shape of that infrastructure, and so we decided to add it in there.
The updated.
Right.
It wasn't in my draft, and I just wanted to make sure that we weren't taking on a project without an appropriation.
Something wrong with that?
I think very simply.
Thanks for keeping us on our toes. And now, so now we're going to have a discussion about the warrant,
1/9.
1/9.
Yeah.
Articles, just in terms of placement of articles.
Right. I'm very disorganized today.
Today?
Oh, all this bouncing around is keeping me on my toes. No, so it's 110, right?
You've got it listed as 1/9.
1/9.
Oh, okay. So what we're going to do here is look at the order of the town warrant?
Yeah, so I thought what we could do, and, the moderator can interject at any time that he'd like, but I thought maybe we could just kind of quickly summarize and kind of recap what's in here. Also reflect on some of the conversation tonight and, figure out what the final warrant should look like. Just to remind the board that you will close the warrant tonight, and it will be, sent off to the printer sometime tomorrow and then mailed out next week.
So no changes?
So we need to, well, we could make changes.
Tonight.
Yeah, tonight's
Tonight's
the night.
the night.
After
Yeah.
tonight.
So, Jim, do you want me to kick things off, or do you want to just jump right in on some of the things that we've done to date?
Yeah, let me just mention two overriding policy considerations, and then Chris, you can get detail and I'll jump in as needed. 34 warrant articles. If we figure 5 minutes per warrant article, that's 170 minutes, which is 10 minutes below 3 hours. So one of the criteria that I would suggest that we use in reviewing these articles is to prioritize them in such a way that if we think that something can be postponed until a subsequent year, we seriously consider that. Because it's a very ambitious schedule. As you know, because we have a fairly high quorum requirement of 175, we probably won't get started till 7:20. And a minimum of 5 minutes per article is going to take us to 10:20. And that's ignoring the debate that I expect will ensue on a few of these articles because they're likely to be controversial. The other policy issue that I wanted to mention is that I would like to try to bundle some of these articles in order to try to conserve time. And as we go through the articles, I'll mention the ones that I would like to bundle. Some of them involve appropriations, and I'm a little bit nervous about bundling articles that have appropriations given the proclivity of our citizens to be watchdogs, understandably so, with respect to expenditures. And I'm worried that bundling some of these articles that would involve expenditures might actually prolong our discussion rather than shorten it. So that's a policy decision that I would look to you for guidance.
So, I guess when I was thinking about this, I thought it would work, as you bundle it, it would work sort of like we do, where you go down the whole list of things, and if there's an exception, you put it on hold, and then
Right.
you continue to move on. Is
Right.
that what you envisioned, or was it
That's
something
what I
different?
envisioned.
So
And-
reading through, asking for a hold in the traditional manner, and going through the entire list at the outset.
Well, our budget article, I would continue to read the line items. Some of the other articles, when we get to them, involve relatively small expenditures. 3 of them involve a total of $60,000. I was hoping that we could bundle those. But again, people, I don't want to create an impression that we're trying to railroad anybody.
Right.
People do get concerned about spending money, understandably so. So it's a policy decision that I wanted to discuss with you all before we make a decision.
I think about that, Jim, in the context of what Chris just presented, which I thought was a very well put together presentation, Chris. Thank you. And we look at the increases, and if you combine just 2 or 3 of the line item increases, takes up half of the articles that you're talking about.
Right.
So that trade-off to me is time really well spent, because if you've got and Madam Clerk, would you like to?
You are speaking as an insider to this process. we would love our citizens to know all the stuff that goes on and be aware of, you know, why we're asking for $50,000 for this or whatever. And I don't know that you're going to get that, and I think you might get some pushback, so I just want to raise that issue.
Yeah, you know, John, you and I, we all have been at town meetings where the school budget sails right through.
22 minutes,
millions of dollars.
$38 million.
And then we spend an hour arguing about a
Leash
new
laws.
ambulance or
Tree replacements.
right. So,
Leash, the length of a leash of a
so,
dog.
you know, that's what makes our town fun and unique and why we all love living
That's
here.
why you get Greg.
So what were the 3 articles? you
Well, I
felt
suggest that maybe
was
Chris take the lead now and can proceed through the articles, and as we do, when we get to the ones that I'm thinking about bundling, I'll bring them up and we can talk about them.
Yep.
So on the first page, what's really the second page, as where the articles are listed, this is standard, so we can skip right over that. The next page is also standard, your operating capital budget. So on the 4th page, where Article 6 is at the top here, this is where we first have started to consider some potential changes. So, excuse me. So Article 6, which is the appropriation for road construction, reconstruction improvements, which really just authorizes the town to spend Chapter 90 money,
Right.
is a pretty standard boilerplate article. So we have, so Article 6, and then if you go back to the bottom of page 3, which is the hear and act on committee reports, those used to be in 2 totally separate places of the warrant. And then with Jim's counsel, we put those back to back because he plans to consolidate those and move those to one, as they are very non-controversial and traditional. And there's no financial piece related there. Now the next few is where we wanted to discuss today. So Article 7, Article 8, and Article 9 are recurring special articles. They are low dollar appropriations typically. So unemployment compensation fund, this is just to keep a balance in the fund. We're asking for a $10,000 appropriation this year. The sick leave for retiring police officers, this is a contractual obligation that we fund when we anticipate a retirement. This is also asking for $10,000 this year. And yes, sir.
Just hang on. Have either of these 3 ever received any sort of comments?
Never say never.
I know, but I mean, just from a historical perspective, I don't remember anybody ever.
In my
Reason I think.
Conservation Fund has received.
Yeah, absolutely has.
I do not recall anything with respect to sick leave or unemployment compensation, but I do recall discussion about conservation, yeah.
Thank you.
And is Article 10 OPEB the supplemental funding that we began last year?
So,
or is that the town's obligated funding?
yeah, so that's related to the supplemental funding for the region last year, but let's, if we could, Selectman Jeffries, table that for a second, over the next discussion point. So, the moderator and I discussed about potentially consolidating 7, 8, and 9, but this debate about whether it will save you time or not.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe consolidate 7 and 8 and then leave 9 separate.
That works.
I think 6, 7, and 8.
6 and 5 would be all.
6 and 5.
I'm sorry, 6 and 5 already consolidated. Okay.
Well, so I guess, to that point,
could you put?
Do you just want to bundle all
5,
4 and
6,
move them
7,
as one?
So bundle 5, 6, 7, and 8. It seems like we should be able to. What do you
I think there is
Yeah, I
going
don't
to be.
think these are controversial.
Okay.
I agree.
Would be my recommendation.
There may be discussion.
Okay.
So 6, 7, 8.
So now are we on 10?
So now we're on 10. And 10, 11, which is the capital stabilization fund, 12, which is land stabilization fund, and 13, which is your general stabilization fund, all have to do with what I just ended at my at the budget update around free cash and the financial reserves. And there's potential opportunity to make some changes here. And based on the financial, based on the finance task force, we think we may be at a point where some of these may or may not make sense to move forward, but I defer to the chairwoman at this point.
Right, so, the financial task force, we've been doing a lot of work on free cash, and we've been working with a consultant. And what we were trying to do here is to ensure that every recommendation we make is fact-based. And so we've been very successful with capital. We actually have gone out and created, and gotten on-site insight reports, and we look at capital going out 20 years, and we are going to present a methodology to the town to fund capital on an ongoing
this meeting?
basis.
At this town meeting?
At this town meeting, because we're there right now. We have enough data, we'll vote on that. We have not made progress we have talked about continuing to fund the OPEB, the stabilization fund, but this year...
Which is the one we created last year.
Right, but this year is a year of flux, because the region is actually funding the account themselves, and they're beginning to set up their own process. And they're also, because of that, the way the funding is calculated is going to be different. So the recommendation we would like to make is to put this on hold for this year and remove it and not do an additional funding until we understand what the region's program is going forward. Because we don't feel comfortable when the region is going to be funding it to make a recommendation to fund it as well.
But
So
didn't the region fund it last year?
No, they did not.
All right, so
The
you get a
region
substitute
talked
11
about
now
it.
then.
So the region funded just
Just the ongoing.
the
cost.
ongoing?
And now the region is committed to putting together a program to fund, to fund the OPEB liability. And as part of that, the whole way the valuation is calculated is going to change, because there's going to be a program in place. So it's premature for us to make a recommendation of an additional funding amount until we understand what the new liability is and how the region anticipates moving forward. Because we think there may be a tremendous amount of pushback if both the town and the region are doing something, and it's unclear to us what the region is
But
doing.
we're still required. We still have.
No, we
don't.
We put the money in last time.
We fund the ongoing costs.
Cost, right.
But the region is looking at a program similar to our program to fund the additional amounts.
Yeah, the additional.
And they're
unfunded
making a
amount.
contribution this year. And as a result of that, they are making certain changes, and they haven't voted on them yet, and we're not sure what they look like. So
This is a pause.
this is a pause. It's not, and again, the free cash strategy is a multi-year strategy.
Right.
We're not going to be able to do everything at once.
Right.
And we feel
okay.
as though when we have well thought out recommendations to make to the town.
Well, that was
to
precisely what we
present
said
those.
last
town
year,
meeting.
right.
That's what we said.
So we,
Framing
I would make a recommendation to
Hold.
to remove
Eliminate
this,
10.
right.
So remove Article
Remove
10.
10?
Right.
So at the last town meeting, we mentioned that there were 3 or 4 funds, stabilization funds that we
Right.
were thinking about. We had the detail around the OPEB, so we asked for funding that time.
Right, and we have the funding and,
And now we're
But-
going to have the
but-
detail around capital stabilization.
right.
Okay,
And
so
it
it's sort of-
doesn't,
But
it doesn't
I would
mean,
still stress that this is being removed this year.
Yes.
For those
right, well,
reasons.
we plan to, and even at open hearing, there'll be a presentation, again, this is a multi-year process, because we need to make sure that
Yeah.
that any free cash we use to fund these stabilization accounts, that we're making the right decisions, that the decisions are based upon analysis that has been done. And at this point, I don't feel comfortable asking the town to continue to fund the region's OPEB liability when I don't understand
How it's going to work.
what the region's plan is and how our recommendation is going to dovetail
Okay.
with theirs.
In this current year.
Right,
I think that's
right.
Yeah.
critically important in the current year, because there's
And
no,
then- So 11 we do.
we also don't want
11
to send the message that this is something we're
Right.
stopping.
Right.
Right.
No,
No,
you're right. It's all
right.
in the messaging.
Right.
So 11,
11 will remain based
Right.
on the.
and we will
task
have a
force vote.
recommendation.
And then
For-
12 was a placeholder.
Right, and for 12, we don't have a recommendation. We haven't had time to thoroughly come up with a plan that we can present to town
Right, so that'll be
meeting.
deferred.
Right.
So
this will be
can we
deferred.
remove that from the
Yeah.
warrant as well?
Right.
Okay.
So it looks like 10 and 12 will be deferred,
Right,
Okay.
or removed, whichever the
Right.
proper, okay.
They'll be eliminated from the.
right, they'll be withdrawn.
Okay. Now,
And then the stabilization fund is all part of the recommendation that the task force is going to make. You know, we basically have metrics, and we know what percentages that are the town, so we're gonna be making a recommendation to the town to move
How
an
do
amount
we-
from free cash to
So
the
that'll be covered this
stabilization.
time.
And how do we cover the segmentation of the stabilization for Article 13? Do we,
Article 13 is just your general stabilization
Right.
fund.
This
It's just your
exists.
general rainy day
Right.
account.
This exists.
So,
Yeah, yeah.
so, you know, we're
So
going
just
to.
put money in.
Right, so the way,
how,
you know,
how
one of.
much and why
Yeah,
is going to be
Right,
the
but
to
we're go-
articulate as Robin's just.
But we're going to make a presentation of that. Tonight, I'm just saying there are two of these articles that we can actually make a coherent, well-thought-out, fact-based presentation on. Those are the two. And the other two, my recommendation is to withdraw.
Okay, yep, let's
yeah,
go.
quick question. So we will be considering Articles 11 and Article 13.
Right.
Would you want to consider those together, or do you
Yeah,
want to consider them
it's all-
separately?
We can consider them together.
As long as we
Because it's
can-
all part of the overall free cash strategy. And,
Okay. Yeah.
you
My-
know,
my thinking is if you
they're
can-
both gonna be a lot of money, so maybe, or transferring of funds, we're not asking for new funds. So maybe it makes sense to do them separately.
So this
people
is
can
part of
look
the
at-
DOR review.
Well, we brought in a separate consultant.
whoever.
Right,
But I mean, this,
Part. It's related.
It's a combination.
right.
right, so as from a presentation point of view, we're following recommendations made by blah, right?
We're following best practices, recommendations made by the bond rating agencies, recommendations.
Okay,
As well as the DOR, who
Right,
runs the financial management.
yeah, no, I mean, then you tee it up that way and you can talk about the two things.
As we
But, you know,
describing, if you
so when
also
you,
have to
when you say
delineate.
lumping them together, you know, each article should probably be voted on separately.
Yeah, okay, so we
Right.
won't
So,
bundle
so
them, okay.
they will be sequential because you took out 12,
Right,
so.
right.
Okay.
14 on the Hill, conservation, or the appraisal we discussed. So the next, this is going back to my budget presentation. This was the article that you used after you tallied up everything that you raised, figured out what you could
Gap was.
tax at the ceiling, and then plugged in free cash to make sure you got a balanced budget. Assuming all goes to plan as presented, this will be withdrawn. But I would, given that we haven't
Withdrawn or
gone open,
dismissed?
it'll be dismissed the day of.
Okay.
That's the recommendation today, is to be
Okay.
dismissed day of.
Article 15.
Yes, but this will go to print. Article 16 is the one-time projects that was discussed, that'll remain. The reserve fund needs to be funded, unpaid bills will be funded. Article 19, so this is a supplemental appropriation to our,
So let me ask, are you thinking about bundling these?
they cannot be bundled.
They cannot.
Article 18 is a 4/5 vote, unfortunately, so.
Okay. So Jim, I just want you to know I have water main maintenance here. And
I'm sorry?
I have water main and repair maintenance on my paper here.
Article 19 is one essentially that if all of a sudden we got 150 feet of snow in the next week and our reserve fund and other end-of-year transfers, couldn't happen.
Monday
that
night.
We'd use free cash to make sure we could pay our bills for the present fiscal year. Knock on wood, this will be dismissed day of.
Okay.
It was communicated to me from the planning board that they're moving forward with the ADUs, so this will remain on there. You heard about the water use restriction bylaw.
I heard it was being removed.
Deferred. So, yes, but I think that brings up a question as to, do we want to go to print with it, or do we want to strike it tonight?
I'd strike it.
I'd strike it.
They haven't voted this one, right? He said if they were going to vote it Monday night.
Monday night.
So then we can't
So
strike
they haven't
it.
officially told us that
Okay.
we could
Yeah.
remove it, correct?
Yeah, it's the selectmen's warrant at the end of the day. I mean, they can decide to remove it tonight if they want, but it's more of a, I suppose it's in part a political decision if you wanted to.
Seems to me that we would need the official vote of the
Board of Health.
And that's certainly fine, if you want to proceed that way. Yeah.
If for nothing else.
Speaking as a
common
law
courtesy.
student.
No, I agree.
Okay, but in fact, it'll be dismissed.
And then the
at
same would be true for 40U, right?
If those are the votes that they end up
Right.
taking, yeah.
Right. Right, although they did not say that they were going to remove that.
The next few are Board of Assessor articles related to property tax relief for seniors. Those will remain. Article 25, Walnut Board of Assessors, also relates to senior tax relief. That'll remain. And so the next article that is up for discussion this evening would be Article 27 related to the proposed solar project. So as you see, we have two articles. One's on the lease for the solar project and the other is on the pilot for the solar project.
Which is the tax,
Yeah, the payment in lieu
the
of
tax
taxes.
smoothing.
Yep. So it was communicated to me in a call yesterday afternoon that we actually don't necessarily need town meeting approval for a lease for the solar project on
That's what
the
town
municipal
council
building,
said.
as it's a municipal building, under the custody of the Board of Selectmen. So, it's a conversation as to, do you want to leave it there as part of the dialogue, or do you want to move it knowing that you still have the pilot component
30-year,
to be
we can
able
do
to-
30-year leases.
Up to 30-year lease.
But we have to get permission from town meeting to go from 20 to 30?
No, anything over 30 would need.
Because, didn't we hear 20?
Well, that was because of the nuance. We didn't own the property there. We were the lessor.
Okay,
Here we own because we clarified that with town council.
okay,
So town council told us we could remove this.
okay. Well,
We don't need, so I would suggest getting rid of it. And if we don't move forward with the solar project, then we'll just dismiss the pilot,
Yep, okay.
right?
We don't need things in here that we don't need things
Right.
in here.
Because I said to Chris, are you sure? And he's,
In the citizens petition, articles
What
that.
about 29?
Oh, yeah.
I guess we
So
have,
again.
we have
you
to
know, the
leave it
question
in
is
We
there.
have
the
to actually
board.
wait for them to do something.
Right.
We strongly suggested that they did do a little bit more work.
I was going to suggest, but I decided to hold off, but maybe I should have. I think that they should have a hearing as well where
I
they invite.
completely
Yeah,
agree.
no, that's
I
really
know.
what you, I think you had actually said that.
Well, I said that with respect to.
What do you?
With respect to Jerry's articles, but not with respect to the Historic Commission.
Oh, okay.
But it's the
But-
same thing.
But I think that, that it's likely that there would be extended discussion at town meeting about that article, because when you do the math, they're talking about homes that were built from 1953
Right.
going back.
So unless they're mid-century modern,
Right. I
they're all
think,
capes.
I think that they may want to broach it with the public in a non-town meeting setting to get a feel for it. If we didn't have so many other
Right,
articles,
you can do it.
then I would say, fine, let's do it. But given that we have such a busy agenda,
I just think this is not gonna go over
Yeah.
well.
No, unless time is of the essence. I mean, if they were aware of some structure that they've been
Right.
watching that they're very concerned about, then that would be a different situation. But I didn't get that impression based on the presentation.
Hope
But
it wasn't too harsh.
no, but I think that maybe we could ask them.
Open hearing?
I'm sorry?
Ask them and hope and see what happens. at
You
open
asked them to
hearing.
have a hearing where they solicited town comments on their proposal,
Okay.
and then postpone this until next year. And I guess, as I say, the only competing consideration that might suggest they want to forge ahead is if they are concerned about a property that is something that they feel should be saved and would not be covered by the current bylaw. But I think,
should we
I
just
remember the
approach
last
them?
time that this
Maybe
came up, it
Steve.
was,
They dropped it at the last minute, the last time this came up, it was a couple years ago.
yeah.
And they had gotten a lot of public sentiment, which was not favorable to them, so they dropped it maybe the day of the town
I
meeting.
mean, I read the FAQs on the website. It was very confusing. And I don't
And
think
you
I'm the
don't-
only one who does that.
Right, and you don't know how many houses it impacts, and, a house built in 1953, that's a lot of houses.
Let's suggest to them.
Yeah, I mean, my
Thoroughly
feeling, just as a general policy matter, is that items that are not financially related, that are likely to be controversial, should have hearings conducted by the specific boards.
Right, and when you were saying that, I was wondering if each town meeting, we should have an open hearing just for policy decisions. And just put it out there, and anybody who has a policy-related article that they want to sponsor,
Feel
you could
free.
do all of them together.
Right.
Because you're right, warrant is just financial.
When I first moved to town, we were newcomers, 34 years compared to the 40
Still a
years.
newcomer?
that-
You don't even register, man.
Right. I'm an illegal immigrant.
No, I have been 25, I'm the illegal immigrant.
But I was actually confused by the title Warrant Committee, because in most other towns it's called the Finance Committee.
Or advisory.
And technically, under the state statute, that is its purview.
Right.
So in the past, when we didn't have such a crowded agenda, we've let those items
Right.
be discussed at town meeting. But I think ideally, it would be best to have the separate hearings
I
so that they
completely
could.
agree.
Yeah, I think, and again, I think there needs to be, I mean, people have to learn that they have to actually have material to present.
Well, I think they were frustrated with the process today, because even with moving the home, I mean, I understand to them, they live this. It makes complete sense. But you ultimately have to answer a whole lot of questions to understand exactly.
Yeah, I mean.
And I know it's frustrating, and it seems as though we're constantly pushing things back, but
anytime that you're trying to preserve the character of the town, and you're affecting individual property rights, it becomes very complex.
It can become.
Right.
Not only complex, but
And I think, right, and I think that's particularly when you start to talk about the review process, which also folds into Jerry's article. I think that's perfectly, the best venue for that is to have a separate hearing where they can listen to comments and entertain other ideas. And unfortunately, a meeting that begins at 7 o'clock on a Monday night, where we want to, if for no other reason, financial considerations, have it completed in one night, that is not the best stage.
No, I think the use of information forums for people about issues affecting town
Right.
really makes a great deal of sense.
Right. I mean, ideally, I would, town meeting, if we want to keep it to one night, and if we want to keep it on a Monday night, we should be presenting packages of information to the town that will enable them to make an intelligent
right,
decision.
exactly.
And it should not be what we as lawyers call a process of discovery at the town meeting.
Which is what I felt as though this meeting was, and I could tell they were all very frustrated. And,
But they also
You know, and-
understandably have a
and it's-
bias, you know, and you're trying to
But
explain
you know,
to them.
I mean, but again, in a democracy, everybody's trying to do what they think is
Exactly.
best. And we need to accommodate that. But the question is, how can it be accommodated in the
How
most
best to
efficient
do that,
manner?
Jim. How
Exactly.
best to do that,
Right.
yes.
So
It's sometimes hard to see your own biases.
it's
You and I don't have any. It's Robin.
so
I think
We're
we
going to
need
have to leave it in for the print,
Right.
I think.
I think you have to, since it's a town committee that is sponsoring it, out of courtesy, you have
Yep.
to leave it in. But
And then we'll
then
talk.
we would have a motion to dismiss if they
Yes.
decide to
Yes.
follow our
Who's reaching out
advice.
to them?
I'm sorry.
You,
So then somebody has to talk to them after.
yeah. I think that's the town clerk's responsibility.
Town clerk does a very good job
Yeah,
at that.
yeah, I think that's right.
We're blessed with a great
Exceptional.
town clerk.
Yeah. She does an exceptional job.
Oh, the
There's
best.
nobody
the
better.
Best.
Well, we
Let
could
me
have
just-
Mona do it.
Let me just mention one other thing about dismissing articles. I have had a couple of citizens tell me that they find it confusing when articles are being dismissed. And probably that's my fault. Maybe I should explain it a little bit more at the meeting, but I just wanted to mention that to you all, that there is a little bit of a cost involved in keeping something on the warrant and then dismissing it at the meeting versus pulling it ahead of
Well,
time.
we don't really have a choice here.
No, I don't think, and I will try to do a better job explaining why we're dismissing it.
I
so
always
that-
had a sigh of relief when that happened at a town meeting.
Is there a way that we could put something in at the town meeting or a handout, you know, Articles 12, 15, 18 have been dismissed due to.
So similar.
That's a good idea.
People pick it up
Yeah.
when they come in,
That's a
that
great
saves
idea.
you, Jim, and we have a handout anyway.
Yes.
So why not incorporate?
Right.
Similar to a play when they have the understudy,
Yeah.
right? That kind of idea.
Right, that's a great
I
idea.
think it's a
that
t-
might work.
I think that's a really good
Tonight
idea.
playing the
Right.
part of Bob Springer,
Right, especially while they're waiting for a
that's a
quorum.
great idea.
Yeah, excellent.
Right.
We could also post it, because we
Put
do
it
have the
up, right.
projector
Yeah.
there, so you could just also post it to
We
tonight's
could do that
meeting.
up, But I
Right.
think it's going to get confusing when we go to do the clicker counts and so forth. So
Right.
I'd rather if we can agree to do a handout.
No,
And we can just incorporate it.
I think that's an
Easy.
excellent idea,
Yeah.
right.
And even just a whiteboard as you're walking into the meeting,
Yeah.
the following articles.
So John, you're going to be the usher who hands these
And then
out.
would we want to dismiss them one at a time, right? I think we probably would still want to do one at a time dismissal rather than
Oh.
try to
Right, but they would
bundle.
have the information.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Beforehand.
Why wouldn't you bundle them?
Well, the only thing I was thinking, you know, the pro at bundling is it certainly reduces the time.
Right.
Assuming that nobody objects.
Somebody misses one, they walk in late, or
Yeah.
somebody is, you know, sitting in their seat
The
20
negative-
minutes late.
Yeah, the negative is if somebody does object, we end up spending probably more time because we have to have a series of votes then.
Well, they're gonna object regardless, though. Like if.
Oh, you
if-
think they might, yeah.
Right, I mean, nobody's gonna object to the fact that you're dismissing 4 articles together. If there's a particular article they wanna,
Yeah.
That's a big sigh of relief.
But the problem is when you bundle 4 articles, then when you have an objection, you then have to have a motion with respect to the article that was objected to, have discussion, have a vote.
and then, and then amend.
Right, and then go, well, you don't have to amend, but then the other articles that were not objected to are deemed to have been, in this case, dismissed. But by the time you go through that process of reading the 4, of getting a hold on one of them, of taking a motion from the warrant
Defeated the
committee,
purpose, right.
discussing the motion, voting on the motion, you would have been
You
just
could have
as well
dismissed
off.
all 5 of
Yeah,
them.
just as well after you have gone through it.
Okay.
So,
So this is new, this is going to be new, so we should be a little, new process for town meetings, so we should be a little conservative on what we,
yeah, I
what we
think
throw at them.
it's helpful. I mean, I think that there's going to be, as we get older, there's going to be more pressure on getting it done in one evening
Right.
because the town's
In 1
becoming
hour.
more complex.
Yeah, okay. So then 30 is Stagecoach Lane, and then we have the
Citizens petitions.
Right. And have the citizens agreed that they'll be last? Have they talked to you about this?
Well, we got to get through the town meeting. We really got to get
They
through
haven't
the
reached out to
business of
me.
the town.
No.
Yeah.
They haven't reached out to,
I mean, the
did
good
they
news
mention
is,
to you?
You talking about Carissa?
Yeah.
Yeah, March 12th, they're on the agenda.
That's all we have from the petitioners, is that they're going to come and present that their petitioned articles to the Board of Selectmen at your next meeting on the 12th.
Okay.
So I'm comfortable.
okay, I just wanted to make sure because, I explained to them that there are competing considerations. On the one hand, if you're late, then there's less of a chance for a motion for reconsideration. On the other hand, you might be there at 10:30 at night.
Right.
So,
And I reached out to them
okay.
to remind them, let me know, and nobody's gotten back to
Okay.
me.
Okay.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Jim.
I'm sorry?
Thank you.
Good?
Okay, great. Well, thank you.
Well
It's going to
done.
be interesting.
Never know.
I hope we can get through one night.
Me too.
I think
Well,
we
you're down
can.
to
That's up to the moderator,
Yeah, right.
from 34 to 29, is that right? 28.
And what do we normally have?
Well, we started with 34.
Yeah, we're 28, we can, we're
Right.
usually around 26, 27,
And if
28.
there
Right,
are
well-
those two dismissed, then you get to
Right.
26.
Well, I think at
Okay.
least one more is going to be dismissed, and
The other thing I wanted to mention with respect to the citizens articles, the school committee, I assume, is going to be speaking to this as well.
so I talked to the
Or is it the superintendent? Okay.
and I think what they're going to talk about is just the process that they embarked upon
Okay.
to reach the decision that they made, just so that everybody at town meeting recognizes that
Frame.
the framework that
Okay.
they
And he knows that he'll have 8 minutes to make that
I will
presentation.
tell
Okay.
him. I will
Okay,
tell-
And
great.
he'll do it before.
Yeah, I was going to say, give him
Yeah,
two.
So.
But he said he wanted to keep it
2 hours
really
and 10
short.
minutes at 26 articles.
Right. Which is okay, because, if, depending on the discussion we have on the controversial articles, that may take us to 11. Ideally, I'd like
Was
to
that
be
a
out by 10,
sarcastic laugh?
Right.
but 11, we can
11's
live
fine.
with. Yeah, 11 we can live with.
Okay, excellent.
Well, thank you very much,
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you for staying
Okay.
till 9:15 this
It was
evening.
very interesting.
Yeah, Robin is really off schedule this time. She's been really good.
I think I said, there's no way we're going to be done by 8:30, but
Thank you.
So we have the
I just-
111.
I need a motion to execute the warrant as amended this evening.
I move we execute the warrant as amended this evening, Madam Chair.
second,
All in favor? Aye.
Always the stickler. Detail.
All right, so the only item of business we have is the town administrator update. Unless the budget is your update.
Just 3 quick things from the
Okay.
board. One, as it relates to the Technology Advisory Board, we are making really wonderful progress on our website migration. We've already gotten our existing website migrated into the new platform.
Is that why it's a little better?
Totally unrelated,
Okay.
but we did separately increase the speed on our existing server for the existing website,
We
yes.
fed the mice.
Yeah.
It's
So it was
noticeably
So
a
that it
little
was
better.
bearable for the next 2 months.
Fed the mice.
Until Kate loads it up with all the town meeting stuff.
They were tired and they were hungry.
We'll blame you.
Yeah.
We're going through a design phase now to make sure that as we talk about, consistent branding and marketing, that's important. And then just the third piece on that is that the project manager will come and meet with the tab just to say hello, talk a little bit about the process and what they can anticipate in terms of next steps on March 10th when we meet next.
So that's the Cape Winds, what was the name of it?
The Cape Forum. Yep.
Retrofit phase 2.
So retrofit phase 2, Diana, myself, and Anthony, who's the IT head and the network expert for the region, We all had a call with Retrofit and have come to agreement on what the scope of work should be for Phase 2 and for Phase 4. Once I get that back from Retrofit, I will execute, I will bring it to the board and then execute that. And then at that point, we also discussed with Retrofit about Mona's going to send them a couple of dates. Diana's going to ask Mona for a couple of dates where they can come and speak to the board and the community about what's been done to date and what they're going to be doing
In English.
In English, plain English.
Okay, then MPN?
Yep, so the MPM recruitment, that's the municipal project manager. We are vetting and finalizing our finalist candidates, and we hope to still be on target for a late March arrival.
Okay.
Any other things that I don't have on my list that may?
No, it was just because I
Yeah, of course,
they
yeah.
were open.
Yep.
You know, they were open items. So. No, I think I agree that we're making some pretty good progress. And the report that we got from Retrofit on Phase 1 and what's been completed, et cetera, was actually pretty well done.
Yep. Yep. And we conveyed that feedback today.
Yep, that's
We're happy
great.
to hear that. Yep. So on the Carroll Community Center, I'll just mention that the OPM selection committee has shortlisted finalists. We have selected, we received 6 responses. We have selected 4. We have not communicated with those 4 yet, as we're working on figuring out scheduling to bring them in for interviews. We'll also use the time between now and the interviews to conduct reference checks on past projects. So we hope to finalize a schedule when we can conduct the interviews, hopefully by tomorrow, and hope to have them in second week of March.
So that was more or less as projected.
We are on target, yeah. And then the last thing is, I failed to mention it during my presentation, but I just wanted to thank the finance team for all the hard work that they've put in on getting us to our budget or the place where we're at today. So a lot going on, and appreciate their efforts. Couldn't be done without them.
It was a
You've got a
really
good team.
great team effort. And
Did you make all
everybody
the meetings?
contributed. I did, right?
On time?
Rob
No, not on time.
Not on
I
time.
made overtime.
calls in though when she's going to be late.
I know.
Right.
She's the
I've
only
worked
one.
with Mrs. Hunter for many years.
She's the only one that has that phone number memorized.
No, they called me, and it worked out really well. I could follow right. It worked out great.
All right, so now we have this
We have to adjourn to.
Right.
executive session.
First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for bearing with us. I'd also like to thank the Board of Selectmen's office. I know that warrant doesn't happen just magically. So I know a lot of hard work went into those. How many articles now? 29? 29
Maybe
warrants.
26.
26.
It's up to
Right,
30, I
right,
think.
We're
So-
hoping for 26.
So just appreciate it. All your work does not go unnoticed. And so now I would like to move that the board enter into executive session, not to return to open session for the purpose of discussing contract negotiations with the chief of police. So we have to poll.
Poll, yes.
Roll call, yeah.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all and have a good night.
Given the extensive amount of material, that was a good job.